you're off the channel. When you speak, you're on the channel that you're comfortable with to avoid overlap in interpretation. And before we start our webinar, allow me to ask all of us to assume a solemn posture for the playing of the AU anthem. Thank you very much. I'll now just take you through the order of the proceedings. There are small changes to our program. So we'll get started with my opening, with my welcome remarks, after which I'll hand over the floor to the chairperson of the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption to deliver his opening remarks, as well as officially open the webinar. Then after the official opening of the webinar, we'll hand over to Honorable Jean-Claude Bismana, who will be facilitating the panel discussion. But before he does that, we are going to have a presentation on the AUCPCC as well as regional engagement strategy that is being developed with the help of a consultant. Nancy will be able to see her. She did a scoping study on the state of play of anti-corruption on the continent. And then she's also drafted an engagement strategy which seeks to ensure that the AUCPCC engages effectively with regional economic communities. So that will be the order of the day. And I just want to urge each one of you to make use of the chat facility as well as the Q&A facility to be able to engage with us as we go through the proceedings of the day. And so on that note, allow me now to go to my welcome remarks as we begin the webinar. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the board, I wish to welcome you all to this webinar that has been organized to commemorate the 5th edition of the African Anti-Corruption Day that falls on 11th of July of each year since 2017. It is a day that has been set apart by the African Union to reflect on the fight against corruption on the continent. And you may note that 11th July is a significant day because it is the day that the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption was adopted way back in 2003, where heads of state and government of the African Union reaffirmed their belief in the fight against corruption. And this year, we commemorate the day under the main theme, regional economic communities, critical actors in the implementation of the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. As for this webinar, the sub-theme is enhancing synergies and stronger collaboration between the national anti-corruption agencies, the regional economic communities, and the African Union Advisory Board in implementing the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, a critical tool for combating corruption. Your Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, both the main theme for the commemoration of the day, as well as the sub-theme for the webinar, speaks to the fact that fighting corruption is a collective effort, and that fighting corruption requires concerted efforts and highlights the critical role that different stakeholders play in combating corruption, from an individual level to the country level, the regional level, as well as the continental level. We all have a role to play, and the stakes are high. And we can win as the continent if we all pull in the same direction, in one direction, and with one voice. And hence, the conversation we'll be having today is key in ensuring that we build on the strength of the regional economic communities, the national anti-corruption agencies, and other mechanisms that have been put in place to fight corruption as we march towards the Africa we want, the Africa of Agenda 2063. And as a board, our desire is that all the 8 regional economic communities that are recognized by the African Union will continue to scale up their anti-corruption efforts within their regions in close collaboration with the board, as well as with other regional economic communities across the 5 regions of Africa, within the auspices of the ongoing reform within the Union, as well as within the auspices of the African governance platform, to which all the regional economic communities belong, as well as the other African Union organs. So, Excellencies, on that note, allow me once again to wish you all very fruitful deliberations in this webinar as I hand over to Honorable Jean-Louis and Ramapidi, the chairperson of the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption, to officially open the webinar. Honorable Chairperson, you have the floor. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Secrétaire exécutive. Excellence, honorable, pour la 2e fois consécutive, nous célébrons virtuellement aujourd'hui la journée africaine de lutte contre la corruption, alors que le continent, comme le reste du monde d'ailleurs, continue à faire face aux défis posés par la
We could give the chairperson a few minutes. I suppose he's having internet challenges. Honorable Chairperson, are you back?
Yes, je suis revenu, et je m'excuse pour cette interruption. Et en fait, je ne voudrais pas prolonger trop longtemps mon intervention au risque d'être de nouveau n'est pas stable aujourd'hui. Ainsi, comme je disais, donc, nous sommes là pour célébrer la 5e édition de la journée de cette journée.
Apologies for that. Let's give him a few more minutes to be able to get back. If not, we may have to request that one of the other board members takes up that role, but let's give him a few minutes. Honorable Chairperson, are you back? As we wait for the chairperson to be back, perhaps I'll request that the consultant can, Nancy, can come on board to be able to present the study, the findings, and some of the recommendations from the study. Honorable Chair, are you back? Should we give you the floor instead? It appears we still have a challenge, so I think Nancy will continue, and then if the chairperson's connectivity. Okay, Chair.
Vous m'entendez? Donc,
yes, Chair, we hear you.
Comme je le disais donc, qu'on va discuter de ce thème pour cette journée, et j'invite donc tous les participants de faire en sorte à ce qu'il y ait vraiment un échange entre vous pour qu'on puisse avancer beaucoup plus dans cette collaboration avec tous les acteurs de la lutte contre la corruption en Afrique, à savoir les CER, les agences nationales de lutte contre la corruption et les citoyens. Et c'est par rapport à ça que je déclare donc ouverte donc cette conférence internationale sur la journée africaine de la lutte contre la corruption. Je vous remercie de votre attention et je m'excuse vraiment de ces incidents qui ont fait en sorte qu'on n'a pas pu se communiquer convenablement. Merci beaucoup et bonne conférence à tous.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, for opening the proceedings of the webinar. At this point in time now, I wish to hand over to Honorable Bizimana, the rapporteur of the board, to be able to call upon the consultant, Nancy, after which then the panel discussion will commence. Honorable Bizimana, over to you. Thank you.
Merci, Madame la secrétaire exécutive. Et merci aussi, Monsieur le Président, pour avoir ouvert le webinaire de la 5e édition de la Journée africaine de lutte contre la corruption. Effectivement, c'est dans le souci d'une bonne collaboration entre les communautés économiques régionales et les régions de lutte contre la corruption, ainsi que les citoyens, qu'il a été invité les honorables ses excellences, honorable Madame Nirere Madeleine, ombudsman Rwanda, Monsieur Timon, vous allez m'excuser de la prononciation, Timon Matrasela Tolo, directeur général du directoire anticorruption et crimes économiques du Botswana, M. Kabwe Matar, brigade, M. Ayesen Okorodoudou, directeur de démocratie et gouvernance, M. Jerry Pierre Kamanami, il y a aussi Madame Nancy, qui est consultante, effectivement, qui a été invitée. Alors, je vais faire une brève présentation des différents invités, mais avant la présentation, je vais vous présenter le général de la brigade spéciale de production, qui est avec moi. Vous savez aussi.
Oui, bonjour. Je m'appelle Roger Ndikoumana, je suis commissaire général de la brigade spéciale. Merci.
Alors, honorable Nirere Madeleine, ombudsman du Rwanda depuis 2020. Elle est également coordinatrice de la région Afrique de l'Est de l'AOM. Elle est membre du Conseil supérieur de la magistrature et membre du Conseil supérieur du PAC. Elle a été présidente de la Commission nationale des droits de l'homme du Rwanda pendant 8 ans, de 2012 à mars 2020. Elle a également été présidente du réseau des institutions nationales africaines des droits de l'homme de 2017 à 2019 et vice-présidente du réseau, de ce réseau, de 2016 à 2017. Elle est également membre du bureau de l'Alliance mondiale pour les institutions nationales des droits de l'homme de 2016 à 2020. Elle a également travaillé au Parlement du Rwanda pendant 13 ans, Chambre des députés et Sénat, à différents postes de direction, dont celui du secrétaire général adjoint du Sénat. Elle a été l'un des principaux orateurs lors de diverses réunions de l'ONU, y compris la réunion de haut niveau de l'ONU sur les objectifs de développement durable, les réunions annuelles de l'Alliance mondiale des institutions nationales des droits de l'homme. Madame Nirere Madeleine est titulaire d'un master en justice pénale internationale et en droit de l'homme. Elle est également titulaire d'une maîtrise en administration publique, gestion publique de l'École nationale d'administration publique du Québec, Canada. Il est également titulaire d'une licence en droit et d'un diplôme d'études supérieures en pratique juridique. On vous souhaite la bienvenue, honorable Madame Madeleine. On a également à notre invité de marque, Monsieur Kawa Makai, qui est représentant auprès de l'Union africaine de l'IGAD. Il est ancien diplomate de l'île Maurice pour la région Inde-Afrique du Sud. Vous êtes aussi la bienvenue, Monsieur Kagwe Mtai. On a aussi comme invité Monsieur Timon Mutolassi Katuloho. Il est directeur général du directoire de lutte contre la corruption et les crimes économiques. Monsieur, Son Excellence, Monsieur Timon Mutola Katolo a une riche expérience en matière de lutte contre la corruption parce que il est directeur général du directoire de lutte contre la corruption et des crimes économiques de CEC de Botswana. Il possède une vaste expérience dans le domaine des enquêtes criminelles, de la bonne gouvernance, de la prévention de la fraude et de la corruption. M. Katolo a une carrière distinguée de service public. Il a rejoint le service de police de Botswana en 1972. 3 ans plus tard, il a été enrôlé dans le département des enquêtes criminelles et est devenu en 1981 et 91 le chef du département des enquêtes criminelles sous l'égide du service de police de Botswana. M. Katolo est l'un des membres fondateurs de la directoire de lutte contre la corruption et les crimes économiques qui a rejoint en 1994. En tant que directeur adjoint, avant de devenir le premier locataire à diriger la directoire en 1997. Jusqu'à sa retraite en 2009, depuis, il a pris sa retraite. Il a travaillé dans plusieurs pays sur les questions de fraude, de corruption et a également mené des enquêtes médico-légales sur les cas de fraude, de corruption pour un certain nombre d'organisations du secteur privé par le biais de la société de conseil Peido Investment. M. Katolo a été reconduit à la tête de la DCEC à compter du 1er septembre 2020. Nous vous en félicitons, Excellence M. Katolo, et vous souhaitons la bienvenue. On a également M. Nancy, Madame
Thank you.
Nancy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you too. On a également Madame Nancy Chepofen Moudje, qui est experte et approche systématique de la lutte contre la corruption. Nancy est convaincue qu'elle est une voix dans sa génération et a l'intention d'encadrer la prochaine génération de leaders du développement international en Afrique. Et en tant que leader de crise penseuse, du système expert en prospective, Nancy cherche à travailler avec les pays, les dirigeants et les organisations qui s'attaquent aux problèmes les plus difficiles de l'humanité et à trouver en collaboration des solutions aux problèmes complexes de l'Afrique. Nancy a précédemment travaillé pour le département de développement international, DFID, en tant que conseiller en gouvernance, à Foreign Commonwealth Office en tant que responsable politique, à l'Union européenne, à l'Institut des affaires économiques, Kenya, en tant que chercheuse. Elle a été consultante pour l'UNICEF, l'Union africaine, pour appliquer les droits de l'homme à Arusha, l'Université Notre-Dame, l'Institut Croce et a entrepris un examen annuel des rapports d'achèvement du programme d'IFAID en tant que ressource, mais il a également travaillé au Kenya. Bref, elle a une très grande expérience, surtout en matière internationale et en matière de lutte contre la pollution, et nous la souhaitons la bienvenue et la encourageons dans ses missions. Voilà en fait les différents panélistes qu'on aura au cours de cette demi-journée. Et nous allons aborder effectivement le thème du panel sur les questions suivantes, notamment en insistant sur le rôle des institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption dans la promotion de la lutte contre la corruption au niveau national, régional, et aussi les défis rencontrés ainsi que les réalisations déjà faites. Nous allons aussi d'abord en premier lieu voir comment les communautés régionales et les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption travaillent ensemble pour une meilleure, pour la promotion de la Convention de l'Union africaine sur la prévention et la lutte contre la corruption. Voilà en premier lieu ce qu'on va voir. Et sans trop tarder, je vais accorder la parole à l'honorable Mirelle Madeleine pour que effectivement elle puisse nous partager l'expérience en matière de lutte contre la corruption au Rwanda. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie aussi. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Executive Secretary, distinguished panelists, distinguished participants, all protocol observed. It is indeed my pleasure to be part of this webinar on the commemoration of the African Anti-Corruption Day organized by African Union Advisory Board on Corruption. Thank you for the invitation. Today, it's indeed a pleasure to celebrate for the fifth time this convention on preventing and combating corruption.
S'il vous plaît, cabine française, double interprétation, cabine française, s'il vous plaît.
Pardon? Je disais que in the East Africa region, we work in synergy in preventing corruption. At country level, every country has a strategy and strive to always achieve the objective. In Rwanda, we have the Office of Ombudsman, which is a hybrid institution with the mission of preventing injustice and addressing injustice complaints and preventing and combating corruption. This mandate is also in other East Africa region anti-corruption agencies, and by trying to implement the African Union Convention on preventing and combating corruption, every country tries to put in place a system or mechanism to achieve its objective. But it happened that countries put together their efforts in the need to achieve one of the AU Convention on preventing and combating corruption, which is to promote and strengthening the development of by each state party of a mechanism required to prevent, detect, punish, and eradicate corruption and related offenses in the public and the private sectors. In this regard, in East Africa, we put in place what we call IACA, Eastern African Association of Anti-Corruption Authorities, which was created in 2007. The aim of IACA is to contribute to the achievement of combating corruption in East Africa countries. IACA's objective is to promote and facilitate regional cooperation, mutual legal assistance, and as well as technical assistance in prevention, combating corruption in the region, information sharing, and share information on investigation, also on asset recovery. Until today, the IACA have built capacity of institution anti-corruption agencies at regional level. We hold many trainings on illicit financial flows workshop, asset recovery training, workshop on money laundering, and cryptocurrency investigation, just to name few. All activities carried out are for achieving the objective discussed above. Some of the achievements of the Ombudsman Office within East Africa will be highlighted in the part of achievement. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, some achievements in regard to in East Africa, we have what we established Asset Recovery Interagency Network for East Africa, ARINEA, which is an organ of East African Association of Anti-Corruption Authority, IACA, as mentioned earlier, which was created in Kigali, Rwanda in 2013, with the mandate to promote exchange of information on individuals, companies, and assets at international level, with the aim of facilitating the pursuit and recovery of proceeds of unlawful activities and to deprive criminal of the illicit profits. This association have members like Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, Djibouti, Burundi, and South Sudan, which are members of East African community. Also, in the East African region, we have drafted Eastern Protocol on preventing and combating corruption. Even though it's not yet in place, this protocol is already there. It is waiting for the Council of Ministers to adopt it. And we made an advocacy after drafting this protocol. And whenever we'll be elected, to help, especially to coordinate all anti-corruption activities within EAC, and also harmonization of law related. Apart from this East African Protocol on preventing and combating corruption, we also drafted a protocol on asset declaration in the East Africa community. And in fact, the Office Ombudsman of Rwanda, in partnership with Transparency International Rwanda, is drafting a proposal of the East African Protocol on Asset Declaration. This protocol will help to harmonize the way of the asset declaration as one of the strategy of preventing and fighting corruption is done in the East African countries, and exchange information between anti-corruption agencies on asset declares that may hide assets in the member state. This asset declaration have been discussed since 2019. Now, in last week, we had a technical meeting, which is the final, and that will be sent to the Ministries of Foreign Affairs or ministers in charge of East Africa to be tabled in the Council of Ministers of EAC. Also, in this protocol, it is provided for an advisory body, which will be with mandate to advise member states, also to check whether member states laws are harmonized with the Africa Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, also national laws if are in harmony with it, and also practice which are compliant. If they are compliant, also they facilitate exchange of criminals, legal assistance, and mutual cooperation on asset recovery or asset tracking, and it will be a very useful instrument once adopted. Even though we have activities at national and regional level, East African level, there are some challenges we are facing, but we have also some strategies. One of the challenges is a reluctance of some states of African Union to assist in asset tracking and recovery. This is a big issue because there are assets which are stolen in various countries which are not recovered. There are also guidelines for mutual legal assistance in criminal matters which are not harmonized, at least in the East African countries and the African in general. Also, the low level of participation of regional economic community in the anti-corruption fight. Also, there is lack of harmonization of legal and institutional frameworks, lack of legal instruments for regional economic community to be engaged in the anti-corruption fight. They're also lacking a strong partnership between public and the private sector. That normally helps in making easier to report corruption and injustice. Those are challenges we're facing, but we have some strategies. As regards the reluctance of some states African Union to assist in asset tracking and recovery, we propose to strengthen cooperation between these agencies in criminal matters and exchange of information related to corruption matters. We need to have standards or guidelines that govern money laundering requests in the asset recovery procedures. Or regional economic communities should increase the political will of preventing and combating corruption in all the operations. Just to mention some more example here, we have what you call anti-corruption committees in every institution, either private, public, international organization working in the country. You have they have to put in place anti-corruption committees. It is an internal mechanism that self to auto control, auto assessment, and this can help even in East Africa or Africa level, where internally we have internal control mechanism that help day to day to know what are the loopholes, where can we improve, and we have also those standards in which from which the committee, the anti-corruption committees may be based. Also, all regional economic communities should increase the political, yeah, that's I have said already. Another proposal to overcome those challenges, we suggest that all member states should have legal instruments that facilitate the cooperation in anti-corruption and the fight against corruption agenda, and to be one of the priorities. Also, this can apply also to all regional economic community. They should have legal instruments that facilitate the cooperation in anti-corruption and the fight against corruption agenda to be one of the priority. this solution can be one of the strategy to implement this African Convention on Corruption, because if there's cooperation in anti-corruption and fighting against corruption, if it is one of the priority, this will be achieved. And also to put as a what's called to have a target on this and report every year on what have been done. If it is set as a target and they will to report on it, I think it can work. To conclude, I'd like to mention that the implementation of the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption will greatly depend on strong political will and a strong leadership committed to eradicate corruption. Preventing and combating corruption will not only be possible if there is engagement of leaders at top level, from top level to down level, but also the involvement of youth in the fight against corruption. It is not an easy task, it is a journey, but involving youth will be one of the key strategy to allow youth to grow with the culture of resisting and reporting corruption in Africa. As in East Africa, we commit to enhance our regional cooperation to build strong association nationally and also international cooperation and African level and internationally to reinforce anti-corruption initiative and strategies to implement African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. I thank you so much for your kind attention.
Merci, honorable Madame l'Ombudsman du Rwanda, pour votre contribution aussi riche que je voudrais un peu résumer en un peu de mots qui consiste effectivement en ceci. D'abord, une stratégie pour la mise en place de la Convention des Nations Unies contre la corruption. D'abord, vous avez souligné effectivement la nécessité d'une stratégie dans la lutte contre la corruption qui demande une synergie de toutes les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption. Et là, vous avez marqué que c'est dans ce cadre que l'Ombudsman du Rwanda est membre de l'IACA. Et j'ajouterai que l'Ombudsman du Rwanda joue effectivement un rôle très important dans la consolidation de l'association des autorités de lutte contre la corruption en Afrique de l'Est. Et aussi, effectivement, en mettant en place des mécanismes de système de définir les dispositifs effectivement, de la Convention des Nations Unies et de la Convention de l'Union africaine sur la corruption. Et aussi, vous avez parlé effectivement du renforcement des capacités des membres des différentes institutions de lutte contre la corruption. Je pense que c'est un élément très important. Et aussi, je suggérais que, parce que j'ai été aussi actif dans ce domaine, les enquêtes conjointes au niveau de l'East African Community, en 2010, il y a eu un programme d'enquête conjointe des pays de l'East African Community qui a pu produire effectivement des effets. Au point de vue cadre légal, vous avez dit effectivement qu'il y a eu déjà l'élaboration d'un protocole sur la lutte contre la corruption et aussi un protocole très important, notamment en ce qui concerne effectivement le gouvernement des avoirs au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Est. et que ce protocole était effectivement au niveau d'élaboration. Aussi, vous avez dit un élément très important qui consiste effectivement à harmoniser le redressement juridique de lutte contre la corruption afin que tous les pays d'Afrique de l'Est aient une vie commune effectivement en matière de lutte contre la corruption. Et je pense que c'est un élément très important. Et aussi, vous avez invité le Conseil consultatif effectivement à inciter les comités régionaux pour une meilleure collaboration effectivement, notamment en matière de recouvrement des avoirs. Je pense que c'est un élément très important, surtout en Afrique, où on constate que les flux financiers illicites, effectivement, causent un dommage énorme à l'État et que la collaboration des États africains dans le gel et le recouvrement des avoirs n'est pas encore adaptée et qu'il existe peu, effectivement, donc cadre regard d'échange effectivement à la matière. Donc, je vais dire d'entraide juridique en matière de recouvrement des avoirs dans les pays africains. Je pense que les communautés régionales, comme vous le dites, ont un rôle très important en cette matière et qu'ils doivent être impliqués, comme vous l'avez souligné effectivement, dans la lutte contre la corruption, notamment en collaborant avec les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption. C'est un défi énorme, effectivement, auquel il faudrait relever et pour le recouvrement effectif des avoirs. Et aussi, le manque de partenariat fort. Je pense qu'au niveau de l'Union africaine, surtout au niveau du Conseil, on doit effectivement chercher son partenariat avec les partenaires potentiels pour une lutte efficace contre la corruption. Je félicite aussi pour les stratégies déjà prises malgré tous ces défis, notamment une collaboration entre les agences nationales de lutte contre la corruption et qui se trouve effectivement une réalité au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Est. Et aussi cette collaboration avec l'East African Community qui consiste effectivement à la mise en place d'un protocole sur le recouvrement des avoirs. Et quel est ce protocole? Vous avez déjà parlé d'un conseil, effectivement, au niveau de l'East African Community pour conseiller les chefs d'État, effectivement, sur les mécanismes à prendre afin de mettre en place des cadres légaux de lutte contre la corruption. Et vous avez terminé votre conclusion en affirmant effectivement en invitant à une volonté politique efficace. Et j'ajouterais qu'il faut aussi une volonté politique, mais aussi il faut que cette volonté politique soit mise en œuvre. Parce que la volonté politique non mise en œuvre ne servirait à rien. Et je vous remercie effectivement pour votre contribution si riche et qui pourrait effectivement inciter ou aider le Conseil effectivement à faire des stratégies de lutte contre la corruption au niveau du continent africain. Sans trop tarder, je vais inviter honorable Madame Seynabou du Sénégal pour qu'elle aussi puisse nous parler des stratégies déjà prises en matière de lutte contre la corruption et de la collaboration avec les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption dans sa sous-région et au niveau africain. Je vous remercie. Vous avez la parole, honorable Madame la Présidente.
Merci beaucoup, Jean-Claude, Monsieur le rapporteur, chers collègues, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames, Messieurs les membres du Conseil consultatif. Je vous remercie donc de me donner la parole ce matin. pour parler du rôle de l'OFNAC dans la mise en œuvre du protocole de la CEDEAO. C'est ainsi que le thème a été libellé. Vous savez, les États membres de la CEDEAO, réunis à Dakar le 21 décembre 2001, ont adopté le protocole aux fins de lutter contre la corruption, avec comme objectif essentiel de promouvoir et de renforcer dans chacun des États parties le développement de mécanismes efficaces pour prévenir, réprimer et éradiquer la corruption. Le Sénégal, comme la plupart de ces États, l'ensemble des États a ratifié ce protocole. La mise en place de l'OFNAC, l'Office national de lutte contre la fraude et la corruption, répond à l'objectif 1 du protocole. C'est ainsi qu'en 2012, il a été créé, cet office, avec pour mission principale la prévention et la lutte contre la fraude, la corruption, les infractions assimilées et les infractions connexes. En plus, en 2014, il a été rajouté aux attributions de l'OFNAC celle de recevoir, de conserver et de traiter les déclarations de patrimoine des personnes assujetties. Alors, quelles sont les réalisations qui ont été obtenues depuis lors en relation avec ce que je viens de dire sur les objectifs du protocole de la CEDEAO? Les indicateurs définis dans la composition des indices de bonne gouvernance et de lutte contre la corruption contenus dans le protocole peuvent être appréhendés en ce qui concerne l'OFNAC à la lumière de la grille des orientations stratégiques dégagées par le leadership dans la prévention et la lutte contre la corruption. L'OFNAC étant l'institution exclusivement dédiée à la lutte contre la corruption, constitue donc, vous le savez, un maillon essentiel dans la chaîne de l'application du protocole de la CEDEAO. Si on examine les différentes mesures posées dans la convention, dans le protocole de la CEDEAO, on pourrait, en relation avec ce qui se fait à l'OFNAC et la stratégie développée, dire que quelques résultats ont été quand même atteints. Par exemple, en ce qui concerne les activités de prévention, l'OFNAC a mis en place un département uniquement dédié à la prévention. Et ces activités portent sur des cibles bien définies, telles que les jeunes, les étudiants, les femmes, les personnes handicapées, les personnes donc à mobilité réduite, les chefs religieux, avec lesquels nous avons noué beaucoup de partenariats. Et ça, c'est en droite ligne de ce que je viens de dire par rapport à l'article 5 du protocole de la CEDEAO. En ce qui concerne l'autre volet, nous avons également ici au niveau de l'OFNAC un département investigation. C'est comme ça que nous l'appelons. Ce département donc est chargé de mener des enquêtes et des investigations en ce qui concerne la lutte contre la corruption. Pour la mise en œuvre des autres dispositions du protocole de la CEDEAO, par exemple l'incrimination, article 6, là également nous avons mis en conformité notre législation avec ces dispositions. De même que l'article 7 concernant le blanchiment de capitaux. C'est dire donc que beaucoup d'efforts sont faits pour être en conformité avec le protocole au niveau de la CEDEAO. Mais malgré tout, il reste énormément de choses à faire. Les difficultés rencontrées sont assez nombreuses. Il s'agit entre autres de l'éradication des conflits d'intérêts. Sur ce point, la plupart de nos États n'ont pas une législation spécifique. Il y en a qui l'ont. Le Sénégal n'en fait pas partie pour le moment. Mais la réflexion est en cours pour intégrer les conflits d'intérêts dans le champ de la déclaration de patrimoine. Il y a également d'autres défis, surtout au niveau de la coopération. Il est vrai que dans la sous-région de la CEDEAO, nous avons ce qu'on appelle le RINCAO. En anglais, c'est NATWA. c'est le réseau des institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption, une association d'organes de lutte contre la corruption. Et actuellement, c'est le Sénégal qui assure le secrétariat permanent de RINCAO. Le RINCAO, une initiative de la CEDEAO pour mieux renforcer les liens de coopération entre organes de lutte. Depuis lors, plusieurs assemblées générales donc ont été tenues pour mieux renforcer la coopération entre États. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'il faudra faire maintenant pour mieux renforcer cette coopération? Parce que quoi qu'on dise, il existe des zones où on ne sent pas tellement cette coopération entre organes. Je pense que le premier pas à mener, c'est d'accorder à ces organes de lutte contre la corruption une autonomie financière, un budget conséquent, un personnel bien formé, bien motivé. Et tout ceci est en droite ligne des principes et des mesures édictées dans le protocole de la CEDEAO contre la corruption. À notre niveau, nous avons développé des liens de coopération avec certains organes. Au moment où je vous parle, une délégation de l'organe de lutte contre la corruption au Burkina séjourne ici à l'OFNAC depuis une semaine. Nous allons signer tout de suite un accord de coopération. On l'a déjà fait avec nos amis du Mali, de la Guinée, ainsi de suite. Donc, je pense qu'il est important de redynamiser ce volet coopération. Il est également important de conformer davantage nos législations aux principes de la Convention, au principe du protocole. Dans le protocole, il existe une disposition qui dit qu'il faut que les États mettent en place un comité technique de réflexion sur la corruption. Je vous dis que la Convention date de 2001, mais jusqu'à ce jour, ce comité n'est pas mis en place. Or, la présence de ce comité et sa composition pourraient assister nos États, assister les organes de lutte et booster leur politique et stratégie en ce qui concerne la lutte contre la corruption. Cette commission technique donc, est vivement souhaitée et sa mise en place devrait, en principe, voir le jour le plus rapidement possible. En conclusion, ce qu'on peut retenir, c'est que les CR, les communautés économiques régionales, jouent un rôle assez important en ce qui concerne la lutte. Quand on parle de communauté économique régionale, on parle d'intégration, on parle d'harmonisation. Et sur ce point, il est également important que les États membres de la CEDEAO harmonisent leur législation, uniformisent leur législation et s'engagent davantage pour éradiquer ce fléau qu'est la corruption. Pour lutter contre la corruption, il faut de la détermination. C'est cette détermination qui est recherchée. Et les CR, en tant qu'organes de lutte contre la corruption, en tant que moyen d'intégration, je devrais dire, ont un rôle assez important à jouer. Je pense qu'il faut donc qu'on redynamise cette coopération et qu'avec l'appui et la volonté politique, mais surtout l'engagement de nos dirigeants, arriver à éradiquer, c'est peut-être un peu trop fort, mais au moins à réduire drastiquement ce fléau qui gangrène nos économies. Voilà en résumé, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le rapporteur, chers collègues, ce que je voudrais dire en ce qui concerne le rôle de nos institutions par rapport à la lutte contre la corruption et par rapport à ce que devrait se faire en termes de coopération entre nos communautés et nos organes de lutte contre la corruption. Je vous remercie et reste à votre disposition pour d'éventuelles questions. Merci, Monsieur le rapporteur.
Merci, honorable Madame la Présidente de l'OFNAC. Je vous signale en passant pour le panéliste qu'elle est aussi vice-présidente du Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine sur la corruption. Alors, brièvement, nous voyons qu'au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, les communautés régionales ont créé déjà un protocole depuis 2011, c'est-à-dire même avant la signature de la Convention de l'Union africaine sur la corruption, ce qui est quand même quelque chose à féliciter. Alors, Aussi, il faudrait féliciter effectivement le fait qu'ils ont déjà un protocole déjà fonctionnel et que grâce à ce protocole, il y a eu beaucoup de réalisations, notamment au niveau de l'OFNAC, où on a créé des départements de prévention en matière de lutte contre la corruption et avec quand même des partenaires très importants, notamment les femmes, les personnes handicapées, les jeunes, ainsi que les différentes communautés religieuses. Je dis que ce sont des partenaires importants parce que ce sont les premiers qui sont victimes de la corruption et aussi sont les premiers qui sont toujours en contact avec les collecteurs. Si je veux parler, par exemple, des religieux, qui ont une voix qui porte loin et qui pourraient effectivement participer dans la prévention contre la corruption. Et aussi, il apparaît dans le département d'investigation en matière de lutte contre la corruption, ce qui est très important, parce que il faudrait enquêter et là, peut-être, au moment des échanges, j'aurais aimé savoir si effectivement ce département dispose des capacités humaines et requises pour effectivement juguler contre la corruption. Aussi, à ce niveau, ils ont parlé qu'ils peuvent aussi réprimer la corruption, le blanchiment des capitaux, le flux financier illicite. Et un défi très important concerne effectivement le profit d'intérêt. C'est un élément très important où effectivement, je pense que légiférer sur ça serait aussi une façon de lutter contre la corruption. Et aussi, notre défi concerne effectivement une coopération qui n'est pas aussi développée, quand bien même l'Afrique de l'Ouest dispose d'un réseau national des institutions de lutte contre la corruption et elle aurait aimé que effectivement cette coopération soit effective. Mais il faudrait aussi féliciter effectivement le FNAC par le fait qu'il y a eu quand même un pas important qui a été déjà atteint, notamment en matière de coopération avec les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption, notamment le Burkina, le Mali. C'est une chose à encourager et qui pourrait peut-être inspirer les autres pays d'Afrique de l'Est à faire de même en créant effectivement au cadre de regard de coopération des institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption. Et elle a invité aussi la sous-région à redynamiser effectivement le projet de coopération pour effectivement essayer de mettre en place les dispositions du protocole de l'Afrique de l'Ouest sur la lutte contre la corruption. Et tout en reconnaissant effectivement le rôle important joué par les communautés économiques régionales, il faudrait effectivement et aussi qui s'engagent en matière de coopération avec les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption. Enfin, comme la précédente, elle a souhaité l'engagement ferme des autorités politiques, effectivement, en matière de lutte contre la corruption. Je vous remercie, honorable Madame la Présidente, et sans trop tarder, je vais inviter son Excellence, Monsieur le Directeur de la Direction nationale de lutte contre la corruption et les crimes, à nous présenter son expérience en matière d'Afrique australe. Vous êtes le bienvenu, Monsieur le Directeur général.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me, from the onset, acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Chair of the AUCPCC and also the Secretary General, and also convey our profound appreciation for inviting us to take part in this panel discussion, and also extend my appreciation to the other panelists for also finding time in their busy schedule to participate in this very, very important occasion. And also, Mr. Moderator, let me just declare from the onset that as Botswana and me personally, we attach great importance to this day of commemorating the Africa Anti-Corruption Day, because I personally was involved in chairing the draft work of the development of this particular convention when it was being negotiated. So that is why we attach so much importance to it. So, Mr. Chairman, we also would want to look at what you are asking us to do. You are asking us to declare the role of the Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime in enhancing the achievement of the SADC Protocol on corruption. And in so doing, you are asking us to declare that role and also look at the challenges that we faced, and also how regional economic committees and national anti-corruption authorities could work better. So in my presentation, Mr. Chairman, we would like to align ourselves or align my presentation with that theme that you are asking us to address. But let me start off by giving some kind of a background. The Southern African Development Community, SADC, is a regional international organization consisting mostly of Southern African countries. The primary objective of SADC is inter alia to cooperate in certain critical areas of common concern and to uphold and involve common political values, systems, and institutions in defending peace and security in the region. So the SADC Protocol on Corruption is a byproduct of SADC Ministers of Justice and Attorney General's Roundtable meeting on ethics and governance held in Zimbabwe, the Republic of Zimbabwe, in 2000. The Roundtable acknowledged that corruption and its interrelationship with other criminal activities was a serious international problem which brings about adverse and destabilizing effects throughout the world, including the SADC region. The SADC then signed the Protocol on Corruption to promote and regulate cooperation among state parties, harmonize policies, and domesticate legislation on the prevention, public education, and eradication of corruption in the private and public sector. So the state parties under the protocol, inter alia, undertake to adopt measures which will create maintain and strengthen the institutions responsible for implementing mechanisms for preventing, detecting, punishing, and eradicating corruption. In the case of Botswana, these institutions are primarily the DCEC, which is my department, the Directorate of Public Prosecutions, and the judiciary. These institutions are also, amongst others, responsible for preventing and punishing the fraudulent use or concealment of property derived from corrupt conduct. Botswana has significantly criminalized most, if not all, conduct constituting corruption under the protocol and continues to strengthen the institutions mandated to fight corruption and money laundering in line with the dictates of the protocol. DCEC has been involved with the activities of the protocol from the very beginning and at various stages throughout the negotiations. The adoption of the protocol was followed by the formation of what we call Southern African Forum Against Corruption, SAFAC, which was formed as a network for anti-corruption agencies in the region, with a view to integrate the forum into the SADC structure and operationalize the protocol itself. DCEC was the maiden chair of the forum, and the chairmanship was subsequently held on rotational basis. SAFAC, as it was then, has since been incorporated and integrated into the SADC structures as a subcommittee under the organ of politics, defense, and security. Also its assets have successfully been transferred to the SADC Anti-Corruption Subcommittee. The meeting of the subcommittee are held on annual basis in accordance with the SADC calendar of events. The DCEC, that is my organization, is the current chair of the subcommittee, which is aligned to the chair of the organ on politics, defense, and security, currently held by the President of the Republic of Botswana. Since the integration of SAFAC into SAC, there has been a number of developments taking place, ranging from budgetary provision to the development and implementation of the SAC action plan. The subcommittee has been instrumental in the development of standardized regional anti-corruption curriculum with a view to harmonize training and also share experiences to address trends and dynamics of corruption. The development of regional corruption assessment tool, which is at an advanced stage of adoption, is also part of the milestones that this committee has come up with. Member states in the region have enacted relevant legislations. Some are at the process or in the process of strengthening the existing legislation to bolster efforts in combating corruption, money laundering, and other related offenses. The region also benefits from sharing best practices and benchmarking visits. The member states have established an institutional mechanism that include financial intelligence, asset forfeiture, and anti-money laundering units. We have also initiated efforts to strengthen cooperation through the signing of memoranda of understanding among anti-corruption agencies in the region and with state actors. We have acceded in the region to various regional, continental, and international agreements aimed at combating corruption and fostering cooperation. Currently, Mr. Chair, GCEC hosts the Commonwealth Anti-Corruption Center, from which the region continues to benefit in terms of training and other exchange programs. So what are the challenges that we are experiencing? Inadequate expertise to effectively deal with the ever-changing trends and typologies of corruption. Sorry. Illicit financial flows, trafficking and identification of proceeds of crimes. Another challenge that exists is gaps in some of the legislations which provide loopholes for exploitation by those who commit these crimes. Common in Botswana as a challenge is what has become perennial interlocutory applications before and during the course of trial, which oftentimes delay the proceedings and negatively affect the combating of corruption generally. Delays in responding to mutual legal assistance requests also frustrates, I'm sorry, Chairman, also frustrates the speedy completion of corruption cases. So in conclusion, what is it that needs to be done? The GCEC and indeed Botswana views the protocol as a very useful platform where the challenges and best practice relating to combating corruption can be conversed. The protocol also helps to build a relationship between anti-corruption agencies as well as between investigators. This is important, Mr. Moderator, because it breaks down communication barriers and in the process provide or improve sharing of intelligence between agencies. The protocol is also aligned to the African Union Convention on Prevention and Combating of Corruption and other international instruments on combating corruption and other incidental matters. We are therefore grateful as Botswana to the AUCPCC for this year's Africa Anti-Corruption Day, because regional bodies enhances the efforts of the Africa Anti-Corruption or the convention, and as such needs also to be nurtured for them to achieve their objectives. So we are thus here to learn from other regional bodies how they deal with this monster called corruption in their regions, and we will use our current chairmanship of the SAC to share with our counterparts in the region the lessons that would learn from this interaction. So, Mr. Moderator, allow me to stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci, Monsieur le Directeur général, pour cette riche expérience en matière de lutte contre la corruption et en matière de collaboration avec les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption. Et je voudrais d'abord vous féliciter et vous remercier pour le travail abattu, d'être d'abord parmi les auteurs de la Convention et qui commence à apporter des fruits, effectivement. Et vous remerciez aussi par le rôle que votre pays joue en matière de lutte contre la corruption dans la sous-région, en abritant les différentes institutions, notamment le centre du Commonwealth sur la lutte contre la corruption, qui joue un rôle important, notamment en matière de renforcement des capacités. Et aussi, je voudrais vous remercier effectivement de votre réussite déjà fait en essayant d'intégrer le réseau de gestion nationale de lutte contre la corruption parmi les organes de la SADC, ce qui est très important et qui montre effectivement cette volonté affichée de la haute autorité, n'est-ce pas, de lutter contre la corruption. Aussi, vous remerciez effectivement sur la politique d'éducation standardisée en matière de lutte contre la corruption, qui permet effectivement d'avoir une vie commune de lutte contre la corruption dans votre sous-région. C'est vraiment à votre actif et qui pourrait effectivement aider les autres communautés sous-régionales à vous emboîter le pas. Aussi, j'ai aussi entendu qu'il y a un renforcement des législations existantes, ce qui est très important parce que la corruption étant un fléau, j'ai toujours dit que les communautés aussi cherchent à améliorer les moyens pour faire face effectivement aux enquêteurs. Et il faudrait aussi que la législation aille de pair avec effectivement le développement de la corruption. Aussi, comme les autres l'ont dit, vous signez des accords de partenariat, de coopération avec les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption, ainsi que les partenaires non étatiques. Effectivement, les partenaires non étatiques jouent un rôle important. Il faut qu'il y ait effectivement une convention qui vous lie. Et parmi les défis, vous avez souligné effectivement les nécessaires d'expertise, notamment pour faire face aux nouvelles manifestations de la corruption qui sont les flux financiers illicites, le blanchiment d'argent, etc. Je pense qu'il y a du rôle effectivement des communautés sous-régionales et du Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine de voir comment effectivement trouver des mécanismes afin qu'on puisse trouver des expertises qui, à mon niveau, ne manquent pas au niveau de l'Union africaine pour effectivement juguler à ce fléau qui constitue un défi énorme pour notre continent. Aussi, vous avez suggéré ce retard entre les instances judiciaires dans les délivrance de certains documents juridiques, notamment. Ici, je pense que vous avez voulu parler des mandats de perquisition, des mandats d'arrêt. Et ça existe partout et c'est un défi énorme auquel font face les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption et qui pourrait, à mon avis, trouver une solution au niveau de la haute autorité parce que j'ai vu qu'il y a un engagement ferme en matière de lutte contre la corruption. Aussi, un élément très important que vous avez dit en ce qui concerne effectivement la collaboration entre les différentes institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption, qui vous permet effectivement de briser les barrières et améliorer les enquêtes. C'est un élément très important. Et là, peut-être, je vais demander, quand il s'agira de votre intervention, s'il y a effectivement un programme d'enquête conjointe au niveau de votre sous-région pour montrer effectivement si cette collaboration est effective. Et vous êtes revenu effectivement, comme les autres, sur l'importance de la Convention de l'Union africaine sur la corruption, notamment en ce qui concerne la collaboration et la coopération des différentes institutions. Je voudrais vous remercier effectivement pour cette contribution si riche qui permettra aux différents panélistes d'avoir des éléments importants pour voir comment effectivement renforcer la lutte contre la corruption au niveau des différentes sous-régions. Et sans trop tarder, je vais demander maintenant à son Excellence M. Kagwe Mutai, qui représente de l'IGAD et qui représente l'IGAD au niveau de l'Union africaine. Vous avez la parole, Excellence.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Allow me to begin by thanking you for inviting me on behalf of the Executive Secretary of IGAD, Dr. Wokene Gebeyu, who sends his apologies and was unable to make it due to other commitments. Let me also thank the AUCPCC for inviting IGAD, which is the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, to celebrate with them the 5th African Anti-Corruption Day. For us, this is a first, and we are very happy to be with all of you. Chair, I think that let me begin by saying that it is extremely critical that the RECs are being more and more included into the work of, at a general level, the AU. And more specifically, we've seen over the past 2 months, the AUCPCC reaching out to regional economic communities to try and assist and to try and find out what role it is that regional economic communities can play in meeting the objectives and the principles of the Convention on Prevention and Combating Corruption. Chair, you will know that at the international level, you have the UN Convention on Combating Corruption. At the continental level, we have the AU Convention. But for example, within the IGAD region, at the regional level, we do not yet have a legal instrument that is dedicated to preventing, detecting, and combating corruption and related offenses. And part of the reason is that we have been debating amongst ourselves as to whether IGAD should actually have, in a sense, a legal instrument. Because one of the questions that we must, that we're asking ourselves is that in light of the numerous conventions that are there at the international level, at the continental level, and even at the national level, what would be the added advantage and the comparative advantage of us at a regional level adding another legal instrument? We know, for example, Chair, that as RECs and as building blocks of the African Union, that we can work on how to better improve on the AU Convention at the regional level. Because, Chair, you will note that if you look at the convention is a general document that encourages, for the most part, state parties to adopt legislature and other measures. And so we are asking ourselves as RECs, perhaps what we can then do is answer the question of how it is that we can assist member states to adopt these legislative measures, how we can assist member states to harmonize policies, whether it is to do with jurisdiction or extradition, how it is that we can work with national authorities to enhance their capacities, whether it is to do with law enforcement, whether it is to do with asset tracing, and whether it is to do with sensitization and educational programs. And so, because these state parties have ratified these conventions, we see our job at the regional level at helping them keep those implementing the convention rather than reinventing the wheel. So, Chair, those are some of the discussions that we are having at IGAD at the regional level, and we'll continue to do so as we try and find out what role exactly should the regional economic communities play in the midst of international and continental conventions against corruption. Chair, let me also delve into perhaps some of the things that REX can do, and perhaps that REX will require in assistance in terms of meeting the objectives of the Convention Against Corruption. The first, Chair, is that Article 3 of the Convention talks about the principles that are key in order to combat corruption on the continent. And some of these principles include the promotion of social justice, respect for human and people's rights, respect for democratic principles and institutions, transparency and accountability in public affairs. And so, Chair, one of the most important things that the regional economic communities and other bodies that are dedicated to seeing this convention being realized is that the effectiveness of the convention at large depends not only on the signature and the ratification, but also depends to a large degree on the other legal instruments, the other legal continental instruments that where these principles are enshrined. For example, the African Charter on Democracy, Election and Governance, the African Charter on People and Human Rights. So in as much as we are focusing on this convention is also tied to the other legal instruments of the African Union. And for it to be successful, member states and REX must also embrace these other charters in order for the principles and objectives of the convention to be met. And so one of the things that we as REX can do is work together with the AUCPCC to not only ensure that this convention is ratified, but also the conventions that require for the Anti-Corruption Convention to work. And that includes human rights and democracy and elections. So in Article 3, we already see that there's a role for the REX to play in trying to really meet the principles of this convention. Chair, let me go to Article 5 that talks about legislative and other measures. And one of the things that the convention says is, especially in Article 5, Part 3, that state parties shall establish, maintain, and strengthen independent national anti-corruption authorities or agencies. Chair, this is one of the areas where the regional economic communities can really play a big role. I will give the example of IGAD, whereby we have, on a number of occasions, brought together our national anti-corruption agencies to try and look at the convention together and see areas where we can, areas of cooperation. But one of the other things that we are doing is trying to strengthen these anti-corruption commissions and institutions by conducting needs assessments for them to tell us what is it that they are finding curtails their work. And you will find that all of them have different challenges, because corruption varies according to country. And so that is one of the things that as REX and as IGAD, we're going to focus on, is a needs assessment of the national anti-corruption institutions, and to see how it is that we can help them. And perhaps even help them with the help of the African Union and other bodies that are committed to anti-corruption. So there's a large part there where we can play. Chair, in Article 5, Part 4, it talks about customs and tax receipts. And if we look at the concept note, one of the key questions that we must ask ourselves is, in light of the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, where is it that the AUCPCC and the REX will come in ensuring that this trade agreement that is meant to enhance movement of goods and services and people will not be inhibited by corrupt practices, especially when it comes to customs documentation, especially when it comes to tariff reductions? How is it that we will ensure that the AFCFTA is a success and is not inhibited by corruption? And Chair, there's also a role for the REX there, and there's a need for synergy there. One of the key things that is ongoing is that the AFCFTA Secretariat and the REX are in the process of finalizing a collaboration framework. And it would be good that as the AFCFTA begins to set off its work, that the AUCPCC is also involved in the setting up of its structures to find ways where corruption can be curtailed even before this thing goes off. And there are a lot of opportunities, Chair, when there are trade agreements. There are a lot of loopholes that need to be closed so that this AFCFTA can be successful and can reach the continent as it should be. So I think there's an opportunity for the REX and the AUCPCC to work together in terms of legislative measures and in terms of adopting strict and stringent policies to ensure that the AFCFTA is a success. Chair, allow me to go to Article 6 of the Convention that talks about the laundering of the proceeds of corruption. And as most REX have mentioned, this is a very key area for a lot of REX, including us as IGAD. As you know, Chair, IGAD is focused primarily on what we call cross-border development, where we believe that there's a lot of economic potential that happens on the borders of our countries. And as there is potential, there is also a lot of vulnerability for laundering of money and movable and immovable assets that we have noticed on the borders. And perhaps one of the areas where, as a REC, we need assistance is how is it that we can set up institutions and units that will help us curtail the cross-border corruption that tends to happen across our continent. One of the things that we're working on, for example, is a trans-boundary financial intelligence unit, because we noticed that between borders, there's a lot of money that is exchanged in very many currencies. And sometimes there's a lot of laundering of illicit money. How is it that we can work on the borders where a lot of this laundering takes place. How is it that we can improve our capacities there? And so that is one of the areas, Chair, that perhaps we can look at as we seek to find ways to synergize. Going on, Chair, I think that the RECs, especially at IGAD, are going to look at the legislative measures that the convention asks to be adopted and find out how can we work with the national authorities to ensure that these legislative measures are adopted in a manner that leads to success. And that is where we will need expertise together with the national authorities to see how we can better address these issues. Finally, Chair, on the issue of cooperation and mutual legal assistance, this is an area as well where the convention would do very well with working with the RECs. Because if we can develop mutual legal assistance frameworks among the countries of a certain regional economic community, then we would see, Chair, faster and more effective work done within the region. And these mutual legal assistance frameworks would deal with issues of jurisdiction and issues of extradition and issues of harmonizing legal policies vis-a-vis corruption. So, Chair, these are the very many areas in which regional economic communities can work on improving the convention and see it as a success. I thank you, Chair, for allowing me to give my points, and I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Merci, Excellence, pour votre riche contribution et suggestion, notamment le fait que il est important que les communautés économiques et régionales puissent travailler en collaboration avec l'Union africaine afin de jouer effectivement le rôle que jouent les communautés économiques régionales dans la lutte contre la corruption. Et vous félicitez aussi le travail déjà commencé par le Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine en intégrant les communautés régionales dans la lutte contre la corruption. Je pense que cela rentre dans ces missions. Et au niveau de l'IGAD, vous dites que l'IGAD n'a pas une communauté, un protocole sur la lutte contre la corruption. Et vous suggérez aussi le fait qu'il faudrait renforcer l'existant en revoyant comment effectivement on puisse mettre des mécanismes pour qu'on incite les pays partis à la Convention de l'Union africaine sur la corruption d'inciter dans la signature des autres conventions qui vont de pair avec la lutte contre la corruption. Là, vous suggérez la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme, la Charte africaine sur la gouvernance, ainsi de suite. Et aussi, vous parlez d'un mécanisme qui est chez vous au niveau de l'IGAD sur l'évaluation, effectivement, des agences nationales de lutte contre la corruption. Je pense que c'est un élément très important et qu'il faudrait aussi renforcer. Mais vous suggérez un défi énorme, notamment la lutte contre le blanchiment d'argent et les flux financiers illicites, où ça nécessite des expertises qu'on ne trouve pas au niveau de l'IGAD, où vous suggérez effectivement qu'on devrait utiliser les expertises existantes au niveau des agences nationales de lutte contre la corruption. C'est un élément très important, n'est-ce pas, qui pourrait permettre effectivement la lutte contre le blanchiment d'argent et le flux financier illicite. Et aussi, en matière de coopération, vous suggérez effectivement une collaboration informelle basée sur l'assistance mutuelle et légale, notamment en matière judiciaire, en ce qui concerne l'extradition, la juridiction, la coopération judiciaire, l'harmonisation du cadre légal de lutte contre la corruption. Je pense que c'est un élément très important et qui joue effectivement un rôle très important. Là, je vais partir d'un exemple de l'Afrique de l'Est où les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption utilisent ce mécanisme en matière d'enquête et qui porte des fruits. Et je commence à vous remercier effectivement. Peut-être on va revenir sur cette question, voir si aussi à niveau de l'IGAD, il n'y a pas un programme effectivement en matière de renforcement des capacités des différentes institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption. Et je vais un peu m'excuser parce que le temps est en train de nous trahir. Et je vais demander aux panélistes suivants d'être un peu brefs afin qu'on puisse nous situer dans l'ordre qui nous a été imparti. Et sans trop tarder, et je vais demander à son Excellence, M. Essay Okorodudu, Head of Department and Governance, de nous partager son expérience. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and I want to thank the other panelists who have spoken thus far. I also want to seize the opportunity to particularly express the economic community of West Africa's gratitude to the AU Corruption Board for bringing ECOWAS on board to share its experience with the rest of the continent. I must say, celebrating the AU Africa Anti-Corruption Day, it's a unique celebration which we hold dearly at the ECOWAS level. I'm sure Madam Zainab would attest to that fact, and that's why the ECOWAS felt it very wise to join you. His Excellency, the President of the ECOWAS Commission, sends his warmest regards to everybody. Our special representative in Addis Ababa also sends their warm regards. And I must acknowledge the efforts and contributions of my colleague at the AU level, fostering the collaboration between ECOWAS and the AU around anti-corruption issues, especially with the AU board on corruption. Let me begin by expressing the fact that ECOWAS in itself took the lead before we had the UNCAC in 2003. In 2001, ECOWAS thought it wise to establish the protocol on the fight against corruption. So we came on board 2001 to emphasize the need to foster integrity governance amongst our member states. And in doing that, I think UNCAC in itself took a lot from the spirit of the context of our protocol. And we quite appreciate the fact that both protocols and UNCAC convention itself complement themselves. In fighting against corruption in the ECOWAS region, what ECOWAS had done is actually to set up a networking platform in furtherance of its protocol on democracy and good governance that requires ECOWAS to do that. So ECOWAS complements itself with two enabling instruments. We have the protocol on democracy and good governance that gives the mandate to the ECOWAS Commission to set up a network on the fight against corruption. So that was done, and it led to the establishment of the network of the anti-corruption institution in West Africa. And I'm privileged to have one of our distinguished leadership, Madam Zainab from the Senegalese Anti-Corruption Agency is here present with us. And she's done a lot to push this network forward. And we've been having several meetings to actually give out best practices in terms of the fight against corruption to most of our member states in the region. And in doing this, I would speak to some of the logical framework and thematic areas we've set out to enhance the promotion of integrity governance in the ECOWAS region. And within this context, looking at preventive measures, what we had done at the ECOWAS level was to look at how we can get a very holistic and collective fight against corruption itself. So ECOWAS, with the members of the NASIWA network, established the policy, the whistleblower policy, to protect witnesses who wants to testify and blow the whistle on corrupt practices. So that policy is intact. It's a preventive tool. It can jumpstart the processes for investigating corrupt practices. And to make this much more effective, ECOWAS established also a civil society platform to complement the works of anti-corruption agencies in the region. And that civil society platform is called EXOTAB, ECOWAS Civil Society Organization Transparency on Corruption and Governance. That's EXOTAB. So that platform and NASIWA work complementarily to promote integrity governance in the region. So in terms of prevention, as I said earlier, the whistleblower policy was put in place by ECOWAS. And I will just give a brief example for want of time. There was this challenging movement of somebody who had engaged in corrupt practices, moved from one member state to the other. And when we were inaugurating this policy, the then chair of NASIWA shared a private discourse with me on how they had moved a whistleblower whose life was threatened, who blew the whistle on a particular individual who had involved and caused the state to lose a lot. And we were actually in the state where these whistleblower had been moved to, which is a family. I'm just trying to emphasize that ECOWAS, when we come up with a policy, the policy has a life in itself and it works so that you see it. So the then chairman and I, we understood that there was actually a very severe need, because when you're fighting corruption, it fights back. And if you're talking about protecting whistleblowers and witnesses, you need to protect them. So most of our member states now have enacted policies. And there are also challenges in this Whistleblower Act. There's a percentage that you're entitled to if you blow the whistle. And if the recovery is huge, there's a tendency that because our system is polarized, certain persons might give out the name of the whistleblower. So amongst the heads of the anti-corruption agencies, with the then chair of NASIWA, we're trying to set up a platform where it's only the chair of the anti-corruption agency that knows the whistleblower. And when this compensation of the percentage are played and the case is finished, that whistleblower is moved from one point to the other. And that was the typical example I made mention of earlier. And in terms of preventive mechanisms, again, we have developed at the ECOWAS level the corruption risk assessment strategic framework to guide our member states on how they work around issues of evaluating corruption and mapping out the risk and seeing how best they can address those risks. So this corruption risk assessment policy is something we put out there for our member institutions to look at. And we've also created a platform for both the civil society, EXOTAB, to work with NASIWA on this, and also a media platform to see how best that you do not take out these corruption issues that come out of investigative media to the open space, so that you protect all witnesses who give evidence on these sort of issues. So the corruption risk assessment policy is a preventive tool that we use. And lastly, I will just quickly say this before I move on to capacity and institutional strengthening and what we are doing as a regional body. I would speak to the issue of seamless, borderless investigation, asset recovery, and asset forfeiture policy we are presently working on. We've had engagement with our member states on this, and we've looked at how we can create and address the challenges of jurisdiction as it relates to extradition and tracing of assets of corrupt practices. So with the seamless borderless investigation policies we're bringing out, we're using it as a policy that will foster mutual legal agreement amongst member states, and also enhance how member states can work amongst themselves to trace proceeds of corruption and also recover them. We know there are banking laws and restraints on that, but we believe within the region that will foster a discussion with bankers for them to understand that banking secrecy within the context of the ECOWAS protocol on the fight against corruption is not an excuse when the anti-corruption agencies in the region, they're actually tracing proceeds of corruption that is domiciled in the bank. So these issues of borderless corruption is something we cherish most, and we are trying to foster cooperations among our member institutions to ensure that this works. And in doing this, there are live examples. The EFCC of Nigeria, for instance, with the cooperation of Yoko in Ghana, they've shown a lot of interest. And also, Madam Zainab's institution and the Togolese institution, all of us want to work so that we can see how this can work amongst us and how we can use it in the fight against corruption. So the seamless borderless investigation, asset forfeiture and recovery, it's a policy document which we've had consultations on. And in the near 2 or 3 weeks time, we'll have a meeting with our anti-corruption agencies to speak to them on this same policy of borderless investigation. So talking about capacity and institutional strengthening, what ECOWAS has done is to look at how we can enhance best practices and training exchanges amongst our member institutions. So we've set up a center of excellence to build anti-corruption agencies' capacity in investigation, borderless cooperation, as well as also recovery of assets. So this center of excellence has developed course outlines along this line and other numerous areas on the fight against corruption and the promotion of integrity governance in our member states. So we presently have this center of excellence domiciled at the Economic and Financial Commission of Nigeria. So that's where we have the center of excellence on capacity building. And we've succeeded in training around whistleblower and witness protection. We've also conducted some training, which we've done around money laundering, and tracing of assets across border. And I must say to you, if you permit me, as a digress, the present chair of the EFCC was one of our first trainers on asset recovery and borderless investigation, way back before he became the chair of the Economic Financial Commission of Nigeria today. So these trainings and these capacity building mechanisms that we put in place, we are institutionalizing them. That's why we have a center of excellence. And that center of excellence is to create opportunities for member institutions to avail themselves of opportunity to be trained where they have capacity gaps. Another challenging issue, but a positive one, is the issue of political will. In strengthening political will in our region, what ECOWAS has done at all times is to look at the policies and statements of our heads of state. They've always expressed the need on the fight against corruption. That is why in 2001, they came up with the protocol on the fight against corruption. And if you recall, between 2019 and 2020, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari was the champion of corruption, which AU graciously, at the heads of state level, made him. And so that pushed for a continental meeting that ECOWAS supported through the Nigerian ICPC, the Independent Corruption Commission of Nigeria, to bring all continental anti-corruption agencies together in Abuja to look at these issues on the fight against corruption and how we can manage issues around corruption risk mitigation. So this political will is there amongst our leaders in the region. And to further enhance this political will, we've also taken steps to work collaboratively with the ECOWAS Parliament. And so what have we done with the ECOWAS Parliament? We've taken time to work with the ECOWAS Parliamentary Committee on corruption and political affairs. So regularly, when we had our first delocalized meeting in Ouagadougou, we invited a special anti-corruption agency that was set up in Ghana. It was a unique one, the Office of the Special Prosecutor, which was put in place. And one of our member states and the civil society group to present their perception on the report of corruption in their respective countries, and also to guide the Commission on their first ever meeting on looking at the fight against corruption and promoting integrity governance in the region. At the end of that meeting, it was resolved that we would have a regular briefing of the ECOWAS Parliament on the status of the fight against corruption in the region. So this is one other strong way of emphasizing that at the ECOWAS level, political will is something that the heads of state have shown, and they've displayed it. And even at the parliamentary level, the other arm of government, they too are also giving their support to it. Within this context, institutional framework and how what we have done to strengthen them, we are actually working now, as Madam Zainab said, just to correct what Madam Zainab said, to put it in proper perspective. We are working on setting up the Anti-Corruption Technical Commission of the ECOWAS region. Our protocol on the fight against corruption actually mandates ECOWAS to set up that independent regional commission. And what that commission would do is to look at all the ambits of the gaps and challenges in the fight against corruption, and especially the monster that corruption is, to create a buffer to protect the heads of anti-corruption agencies and give them a strong backing when they have challenges like the gap on jurisdictional investigation, mutual legal assistance, and private sector involvement and multinational companies' involvement in corrupt practices, how we manage them. So this commission, which will be very independent, will be an agency of ECOWAS, independent agency of the ECOWAS region, and will work solely to strengthen what the heads of state believe in the context of the spirit of that article in the protocol on the fight against corruption, to enhance their political will and to give a regional face that is active, that is very constructive in the fight against corruption. So that technical commission will be set up soon, and I'm working assiduously towards doing that. It's something we'll present and go through all the protocols at the ECOWAS level to ensure that that commission is set up and staffers will be put in place for the commission to be working. When this is put in place, we believe that our policy on the borderless investigation with regards to asset forfeiture, tracing, and recovery would actually be actualized. And so we are hoping that within the next 2 years, all of these will be finalized. Capacity transfers, what have we done at the ECOWAS level? We have looked at the whole element of mutual cooperation amongst anti-corruption agencies in West Africa. So what have we done? From time to time, we encourage such collaboration. And in doing this, we are looking at tracing and looking at financial flows of corrupt practices. And in looking at tracing and monitoring financial flows, Financial Intelligence Unit works with the ECOWAS member institution to see how best they can facilitate the tracing of illicit funding in our region. So basically, in strengthening these exchanges, we have been able to build bridges. And I'm happy Madam Zainab did allude to it too, that presently as she speaks here, Burkina Faso anti-corruption agencies, they are sitting with them to share experiences and also to learn from their capacity knowledge on what they are doing with the fight against corruption. And I'm happy to say here that in terms of creating independent autonomous anti-corruption agencies in the ECOWAS region, this is happening. I will give a good example. Mali used to have a body that was not an autonomous independent anti-corruption agency. It used to have the Bureau de Verificateur de General. But today, Mali has an independent anti-corruption agencies. And one of a good friend and brother whom we had worked so assiduously to strengthen ASIWA is presently the head of the place, Monsieur Guindo. So I commend Mali and I commend him too for all that effort. So in terms of exchanges of ideas and sharing of capacity, that has worked. I would talk last but not the least on the exchange and information of intelligence sharing. This has helped us a great deal amongst anti-corruption agencies in the region to combat the limiting effect of jurisdiction and other interagencies complication in terms of monitoring and investigating corrupt practices. So with exchange of information and intelligence sharing on corruption, a lot of recoveries have been done. You know, with the fight against corruption, some of these recoveries and some of these exchanges are classified. It's only when the case has finished totally, and because of the exigency to protect the whistleblower and witnesses who testify in the case, you tend not want to speak about this high recovery. But I want to tell you, in our region, a lot of this is happening. And we are trying to look at that in terms of when elections are coming up. So we always have a training for political parties, and we speak to the the funding for financing political parties, the funding for financing campaigns. And so we'll bring in a financial intelligence unit in any member state to come and speak to them in terms of capital inflow into the country and capital outflow when we are getting close to elections. So these, in form of exchanges of information, has helped a great deal to strengthen the collaboration among anti-corruption agencies. Not among all of them, but some of the big ones have worked around this with us. And we are hoping that when we finally come up with this borderless investigation, what Madam Zainabu said in terms of cooperation will be strengthened. And we are happy that she's leading by example with what she's doing with Burkina Faso. On a final note, I would want to emphasize the need on capacity transfers with regards to mutual legal cooperation. I think this is very, very necessary. And in terms of capacity transfer, I want to look at what one of the speakers has said earlier on. The AU Board on Corruption and the AU Convention on Corruption, it's a policy enacting documents that give lives to what we do at the REC. And what we do at the REC is to bring into bear our contextual reality and look at the regional policies that we have in place and get our member states to harmonize their practices around the fight against corruption and promoting integrity governance to sit well with best international practice. And in doing this, we have monitoring mechanisms. And one of such monitoring mechanisms is what I've told you about, reporting to the ECOWAS Parliament and giving the ECOWAS Parliament regular update on the fight against corruption. We're actually extending, just as a digress, extending this same support to with the NEPAD, the African Peer Review Mechanism. We invited them just last month to speak to our ECOWAS Parliament on the level of ECOWAS member state conformity with the African Peer Review Mechanism. So basically, these are what we are doing at regional level, and we believe that we could further strengthen this. I'm looking forward to the next executive meeting of NASIWA, where we would elect new leadership for NASIWA to further strengthen the work we are doing. I want to commend the present leadership under Mr. Ben Kaifala, Madam Zainabu, for the good work they are doing. And I'm trusting that they would keep encouraging us at the ECOWAS Commission to come up with more policies and to also foster their cooperation amongst themselves. On a final note, I want to emphasize this, and this is very key. We need to protect our heads of anti-corruption agencies. When they fight corruption, the corrupt personalities use whatever they have to fight them. And the fight is not just within international trading organizations or corporations also come against them. So we need to look out for a mechanism that will support them. And I think as we celebrate the AU Anti-Corruption Day, there is need for us to take this as a point into cognizance. How do we protect the heads of anti-corruption agencies from the bullish response of corruption itself? And also, how do we give account for proper remuneration for people who recover billions and billions and trillions of dollars, and yet they are paid so poorly? There's a likelihood that there will be temptation. So I want to rest my presentation here, and I believe that going forward, at the end of this meeting, we will have some response and some advice to these proposals I've put the tail end of this presentation. I thank you all for the opportunity, and I look forward to any clarification that will be brought to bear. Thank you.
Merci, Excellence, pour votre intervention, bien qu'il a été trop long. Donc, je vais demander, je vais d'abord synthétiser et après, il y a un représentant d'Afrique centrale qui a voulu aussi faire une petite intervention. Donc, il est le bienvenu après cette brève résumé de ce que vient de dire Excellence, représentant de démocratie et de governance. Il a effectivement parlé le fait que cette journée est une journée très importante parce qu'elle permet à l'Afrique de s'évaluer sur le pas franchi en matière de lutte contre la corruption. Et aussi, il a parlé de deux éléments très importants, notamment en ce qui concerne la protection des lanceurs d'alerte, où quand même au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, il existe un mécanisme de protection de lancer d'alerte qui consiste à déplacer d'un lieu à l'autre, qui reste secret, n'est-ce pas? Le lancer d'alerte, c'est un élément très important et qui manifeste effectivement cette collaboration et à peu de frais. Aussi, il a parlé aussi de cette collaboration transfrontalière qui consiste dans le complément des avoirs à l'extradition et à la coopération judiciaire. Je pense que ce sont des éléments aussi auxquels il faudrait, n'est-ce pas, encourager. Un élément très important dont il a parlé concerne effectivement la collaboration avec les banques, n'est-ce pas, parce que ces banques jouent un rôle très important, notamment parce que ce sont par lesquels transitent les produits du blanchiment d'argent, les flux financiers illicites. Et là, je voudrais demander à mon tour aussi, au niveau effectivement de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, comment travaillent les Financial Intelligence Unit, comment ils travaillent. Est-ce que tous les institutions nationales de lutte contre la corruption de tous les pays possèdent effectivement ces unités d'intelligence financière ou d'investigation financière? Parce que ce sont eux qui pourraient effectivement juguler ce phénomène de blanchiment d'argent et de flux licites. Et élément très important dont il a parlé consiste effectivement dans la mise en place des politiques, dans la mise en œuvre des politiques des hautes autorités qui sont les chefs d'État. C'est un élément très important. Et là, aussi, j'appuierai cette idée par le fait que cette journée, la journée africaine de lutte contre la corruption a été proposée par, effectivement, le Nigeria. Je pense que c'est un pas très important qu'il faudrait aussi soutenir. Mais aussi, la mise en place de la commission technique de lutte contre la corruption au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, qui va essayer de revoir, donc d'étudier les voies et moyens d'améliorer le cadre légal de lutte contre la corruption et de voir comment protéger effectivement les chefs d'institution nationale de lutte contre la corruption. Et cela aussi cadre avec la déclaration de Jakarta qui demandait aux États partis d'essayer de rendre indépendants les chefs des institutions de lutte contre la corruption, notamment aller assurer une indépendance financière, aller assurer une indépendance politique par la façon dont ils sont nommés, par leur mandat, parce que c'est un élément très important, effectivement, qu'il faudrait tenir compte. Sans trop aller en détail, je pense qu'on aura fait de temps pour ça. Je voudrais inviter le représentant de l'Afrique centrale de faire une brève présentation d'au moins 3 minutes. Vous êtes le bienvenu, monsieur le président. Je pense qu'il n'est pas disponible. Et si je vais inviter Excellence Géoli Pilari Panissari de la SADC et qui est un officier de liaison au niveau de l'Union africaine. Vous êtes le bienvenu, Excellence.
Monsieur le modérateur, merci beaucoup de m'accorder la parole. Je vais procéder en anglais, fidèle à la SADC. Donc, je reconnais le chairperson, the executive secretary, the representatives of all the RECs here present. I see many of my colleagues, Kagwe, Ambassador Matata, and Rufina from ECAS, and ECOWAS as well, and all panelists and attendees. I feel greatly honored to be part of this webinar, which has been organized as part of this commemoration. And on behalf of SADC, I thank AUABC for this invitation and its engagement strategy involving national anti-corruption authorities, RECs, and African Union. Before proceeding, I wish to make two observations. The first one would be, I thank Mr. Katolo, the DG of DCEC from Botswana, and also chair of the subcommittee, who perfectly spoke about the efforts of SADC to fight corruption. Actually, I'll try not to repeat my statement here, but I'll try to add more details to what he already informed. And actually, he gave a perfect example of what a REC is achieving and what member states is implementing as well. And second point is there were very interesting points raised by the panelists present here, and it's worth pondering about. But I'll leave it to the platform members and to the Africa governance architecture to work on them in the best interest of all actors. As for me, I'll just touch briefly on what SADC has been achieving in contributing to the fight against corruption and efforts being taken to strengthen linkages, particularly with the AUCPCC. As we all know, corruption remains a serious global challenge and is also a major threat to peace, security, sustainable development, and stability. Non-performing economies resulting in increasing levels of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. These are the major drivers of corruption which have been cited. However, since all of you today present, whether panelists or attendees, you're very well aware of all this. I will refrain from talking too much on this, and I'll try to jump straight to what SADC is achieving. SADC acknowledges the increasing threat that corruption is posing as a key enabler of a range of transnational organized crimes, including but not limited to wildlife crime, human trafficking, and smuggling of migrants, and therefore needs concerted and resolute efforts to mitigate it. The linkages that corruption also has with money laundering and illicit financial flows cannot be overemphasized. This means that anti-corruption efforts, both at national and regional levels, had to be broadened and transcend anti-corruption agencies to include strong cooperation with other stakeholders, national, regional, and international level, among others. More critically in this regard, at SADC level, anti-corruption efforts have been mainstreamed into the processes of implementation of the SADC region's transnational organized crime strategy, which has just been adopted by the Ministerial Committee of the organ. Like I already said, the fight against corruption requires collaborative efforts of various stakeholders. So at our level, SADC is tackling the issue at two different levels. The first one would be national level, and second one, regional level. At national level, our dear colleague from Botswana gave nearly all the information necessary, but I tried to quickly give you some inputs. SADC member states are undertaking various legislative, policy, and institutional interventions to strengthen anti-corruption efforts. These interventions are driven by efforts to align them with the various instruments with which the member states have acceded to, mainly the Protocol Against Corruption, AUC Convention on the Prevention and Combating of Corruption, and the UNCAC for the UN. Based on the recently conducted regional corruption assessment, these measures include, and it's worth noting them, strengthening of legislation to bolster efforts to tackle corruption and other related crimes. I'm talking about money laundering, illicit financial flows, and some others as well. Strengthening institutional mechanisms that include anti-corruption agencies, finance intelligence authorities, asset forfeiture units to lead efforts against corruption and other related crimes, again, money laundering, illicit financial flows. Another measure worth noting is the enactment of specific legislation to increase detection of corruption and other related crimes, such as legislation to enhance protection of whistleblowers. I believe my colleague from ECOWAS did mention that as well. This happens in the ECOWAS region. We are also working on strengthening regional cooperation through, among other ways, MOU, but also acceding to various regional, continental, and international agreements to foster cooperation. Enhancing enforcement efforts on asset recovery, which is a key tool in efforts to fight corruption and transnational organized crime. Now, coming to the regional level, SADC anti-corruption efforts are anchored on the protocol, which has been extensively spoken about earlier, but the SADC protocol came into force in 2005, and some of the objectives, which I'm going to list here, are to promote and strengthen the development of mechanisms needed to prevent, detect, punish, and eradicate corruption in the public and private sector. We are talking a protocol into force more than 16 years. So quite a lot of efforts have been already implemented and achieved. It also serves the purpose of promoting, facilitating, and regulating cooperation among the state parties to ensure the effectiveness of measures and actions to prevent, detect, punish, and eradicate corruption. It also fosters the development and harmonization of policies and domestic legislation relating to the prevention, detection, and punishment. The Article 11 provides for the establishment of a committee, which again has already been spoken about. The SADC Anti-Corruption Subcommittee was established in 2015, and it reports to the Ministerial Committee of the organ in line with the protocol. It meets annually. To operationalize the objectives of this protocol, there's something that we call the SADC Strategic Anti-Corruption Action Plan 2018-2022, which was developed and adopted by the Ministerial Committee of the organ in 2018. Coordinated by the SADC Secretariat, the plan has activities that aim at achieving the objectives of the protocol. Some achievements within the past year, the SADC region has concluded a regional corruption assessment. This assessment tracked progress in the implementation of the protocol against corruption, and also ascertained response efforts being undertaken by our member states, our 16 member states, to other emerging corruption-linked issues. This assessment serves the purpose of informing the policy direction of the SADC Anti-Corruption Subcommittee in coordinating regional anti-corruption efforts. The SADC region has also developed what we call a standardized regional anti-corruption curriculum. This facilitates the enhancement of capacity building efforts of anti-corruption personnel, and also harmonization of training standards in the areas of investigation, prosecution, corruption, prevention, and public education. The implementation of this curriculum will enhance effectiveness of anti-corruption efforts at both national and regional level. This is what we believe. Coming to the links with the AU and the UN, we are both party, as you know, because we are member states, to the AUCPCC and to UNCAC. While the compliance and monitoring of these two instruments fall under the domain of the AU and the UNODC respectively, it cannot be overemphasized that the various instruments share a common goal, which I can summarize as strengthening policy, legislative, and institutional frameworks in state parties to effectively combat corruption. So it is therefore important to mention that SADC collaborates with UNODC. An MOU was signed in 2012. This allowed us to facilitate the implementation of the joint regional program, making the Southern Africa region safer from drugs and crime. And corruption falls under the pillar 2 of the program known as criminal justice and integrity. There are currently steps underway to strengthen the linkages with AUCPCC through its engagement strategy and with SADC. Example, SADC is currently participating in the process championed by AUCPCC to develop an engagement plan with the other regs as well. So it is hoped that through the implementation of this action plan, it will benefit the implementation of both the SADC protocol against corruption and the AUCPCC by fostering cooperation and creating better synergies. I'll conclude here by saying that there's an importance to strengthen the links, and from what I see right now, this is happening between the bodies that are charged with the task of overseeing the implementation and compliance of these instruments. So on behalf of SADC, I therefore commend the organizers of this webinar for bringing together the various national anti-corruption authorities, institutions fighting corruption, and the regs. I'll end up with one last line, in which I believe is only in strengthening our links can we also enhance implementation of these instruments and enable member states to reap the benefits. So I hope I was brief enough, so thank you very much for your attention.
Merci, Excellence, pour cette brève présentation et merci aussi pour avoir félicité les organisateurs, n'est-ce pas? Et comme vous le dites, effectivement, ce panel rentre dans le cadre du renforcement des liens entre les CR et le Conseil. Donc, tout en revenant sur ce que vous avez dit, votre collègue, c'est que vous avez axé votre intervention sur le fait que le protocole de la SADC sur la lutte contre la corruption l'entre effectivement dans le programme de la Convention de l'Union africaine sur la prévention et la lutte contre la corruption et en harmonie avec cette convention et la Convention des Nations Unies contre la corruption. Et que les grandes lignes de la mise en œuvre de cette convention consistent notamment au renforcement de la législation des États partis en matière de lutte contre la corruption, le renforcement des mécanismes institutionnels comprend le renseignement, le recouvrement des avoirs, etc. Et aussi la mise en place d'une législation appropriée pour lutter contre la corruption et le renforcement de la coopération régionale à travers le protocole d'accord et qui est, n'est-ce pas, un peu développé au niveau de votre région. Et aussi, vous avez parlé du fait qu'il y a effectivement la mise en place dans un protocole sur le recouvrement des avoirs et la coopération pour, n'est-ce pas, la lutte contre les criminalités transfrontalières et la facilitation et l'agrémentation de la coopération entre les États partis en matière de prévention, de détection et d'hygiène et de recouvrement des avoirs et la mise en place des standards d'enquête. Et qu'au niveau de la coopération au niveau de l'Union africaine, qu'effectivement, la SADC joue un rôle très important, notamment dans le renforcement de cette coopération par les plans d'engagement. Donc, en gros, c'est ça que vous avez dit. Alors, il y a un représentant de l'Afrique centrale qui avait demandé d'intervenir. Je pense qu'il est prêt et qu'il pourrait intervenir avant l'intervention de l'expert. Vous avez la parole, monsieur le représentant de la communauté d'Afrique centrale.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Vous m'entendez? Allô?
Oui, on vous entend bien.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président de séance. Bonjour, chers collègues. Je voudrais remercier d'abord et féliciter les organisateurs de ce webinaire dans le cadre de la célébration de la Journée africaine de commémoration de lutte contre la corruption, ainsi que les brillantes présentations qui ont été faites sur les avancées des CER sur cette question. C'est vrai que la CAC n'est pas panéliste, mais j'ai quand même voulu prendre la parole, Monsieur le Président, avec votre permission. Je voudrais donc intervenir en tant que chef de bureau de représentation de la CAC auprès de l'Union africaine. Non pas pour poser une question, mais pour faire une petite contribution sur les avancées des États membres de la CAC dans le domaine que nous traitons. En effet, s'il est vrai que la CAC ne dispose pas encore d'un instrument juridique régional de prévention et de lutte contre la corruption, il est cependant important d'informer que les États de la sous-région Afrique centrale ont fait des avancées remarquables sur cette question. En effet, plusieurs États de l'Afrique centrale ont signé et ratifié la Convention de l'Union africaine sur la prévention et la lutte contre la corruption, en l'occurrence le Gabon, le Cameroun, le Congo, la République centrafricaine, pour ne citer que cela, parce que nous sommes quand même 11 États. Les membres de la CAC ont par ailleurs mis en place des structures nationales de prévention et de lutte contre la corruption. Nous avons par exemple le Gabon qui a mis en place une commission nationale de lutte contre l'enrichissement illicite et institutionnalisé une journée de lutte contre la corruption et l'enrichissement illicite le 9 décembre de chaque année. Le Congo dispose d'un observatoire de lutte contre la corruption. Le Cameroun, quant à lui, mène ses actions de lutte dans le cadre de l'opération Épervier. Monsieur le Président, je voudrais, pour ne pas être assez long, je voudrais conclure en informant que les États de l'Afrique centrale sont membres du groupe d'action de lutte contre le blanchiment des capitaux en Afrique centrale, nommé GABAC. Et comme la Guinée équatoriale ont mis en place des agences nationales d'investigation financière, et ces agences nationales travaillent avec des ministères en charge de la sécurité, de la justice et des banques. Donc voilà, Monsieur le Président, ce que je voudrais ajouter dans pour le compte de l'Afrique centrale et informer aussi que la commission de la CAC travaille pour l'harmonisation des actions coordonnées avec les États pour mettre en place une stratégie régionale de lutte contre la corruption. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
C'est à moi de vous remercier pour la brève présentation et des informations utiles parce qu'effectivement, on s'est inquiété de l'absence d'une délégation d'Afrique centrale. Et je pense que, bien que vous ne disposez pas d'un instrument juridique de protocole en matière de lutte contre la corruption, et que vous avez déjà fait quand même un grand pas, notamment la ratification par presque tous les pays d'Afrique centrale de la Convention de l'Union africaine sur la corruption. Et j'informerai les panélistes et les membres présents que le dernier pays en date a signé la Convention est au Cameroun, qui fait partie effectivement de la région d'Afrique centrale. Il y a aussi cette avancée, le fait que vous disposiez d'une journée africaine de lutte contre la corruption. Je pense que c'est un pas très important. Et ce groupe d'action de lutte contre le blanchiment d'argent. Et je voudrais demander effectivement comment se fait la coordination au niveau des différents États en matière du blanchiment d'argent et du recouvrement des avoirs. Sans trop tarder, je vais aussi demander à Madame Nancy, expert, n'est-ce pas, de faire une brève présentation avant de revenir aux questions qui ont été posées par les différents intervenants. Je vous donne la parole, Madame Nancy.
Thank you very much. Allow me not to use my cameras because of the bandwidth that I currently have. But that said, I'd like to first of all acknowledge the chair. Thank you very much, and all protocols observed. And before I go into my presentation, I'd like to just appreciate the participation that the different regional economic communities did make towards the success of this particular project. And I've seen some of you in the room today. And just to begin is that I'll be presenting a brief presentation about a study and a process that we collaborated and co-created together with the regional economic blocks and the AUCPCC. And so this work began in January and culminated with the co-creation of an engagement strategy that the AUCPCC and the regional economic blocks would now be able to use in terms of looking at what were the priority areas identified. And so just to take you through what this particular assignment was, I'll be giving you an overview of the findings, just reflections, and some of the top headlines that came as a result of this work. I'm also conscious of time, and so I've really been able to press down this particular presentation to just make sure that you're able to get the gist, but I would encourage you to be able to get in touch with AUCPCC, who will be able to share with you the study once it's finalized. So in terms of the terms of reference, this work sought to look at review the state of play of anti-corruption efforts at the REX level in Africa. We also undertook a mapping of existing anti-corruption policies, frameworks, laws, and institutions at REX. We identified the institutional, policy, and strategic gaps in anti-corruption programs and the strategies at REX level, including the extent of the alignment of regional instruments to the AUCPCC. The report also did reflect on recommendations to strengthen the anti-corruption efforts, measures between and among the RECs, and it also informed the creation of the engagement strategy. Just to share a few reflections from speaking to the various regional economic communities from IGAD, COMESA, EAC, ECOWAS, Arab Maghreb, and even SADC, there was an openness to engage with the AUBC by the RECs, and this was really welcomed. And they did acknowledge that many had limited interaction with the AUBC outside of the AGA platform. And so this particular process of being able to engage on a different level was really something that the regional economic communities would see as quite beneficial. There was also then the realization of the language barrier across the different regional economic blocks and how to be able to mitigate that. And there was also an expression on how to be able to find tools on how to navigate the politics of corruption, vested interest, the power interplay, the formal and informal power to effectively address corruption problems. And the other thing as well is that there was the reflection that this particular process in terms of engaging needs to be a live process to ensure that it remains adaptable and agile in the changing environment, because corruption in itself is kind of complex, it's systemic, and being able to have one that is kind of reflects on the contextual realities would be quite important. So what were the findings of this particular work? So I've really summarized it because I'm also conscious of time, but I will just highlight some of the key critical points that came out of this particular study. And one of it was the issue around engagement, which I have really shared, that RECs expressed an interest in understanding how they could engage meaningfully with the board, especially around what areas of engagement would look like and how to be able to even factor in the new shifts and what that meant. In terms of laws, it's something that I think the RECs have also spoken to this morning, is that while RECs have made progress in developing laws, policies, and strategies to address corruption and related offenses, we did observe that it's not the same in all the 8 regional economic blocks in terms of adoption and implementation. Some of the RECs do not have specific laws on corruption, and so when it comes to questions around harmonization and coordination, that becomes quite a challenge. When it came to engagement, we did recognize that some of the RECs had made interlinkages with regional, global, and national processes on anti-corruption, were involved in networks around asset recovery and tackling of illicit financial flows and anti-money laundering. Very good examples of this are the likes of COMESA, SADC, ECOWAS, and EAC. And we also did recognize that other AU organs were also playing a critical role in terms of tackling corruption, and there was a need to be able to bring them into the fold when it came to having these particular discussions. There was also a realization in terms of policy for the need for coherent harmonization, especially in places where there were absence of no laws or policies, and how to be able to support those particular regional economic blocks to be able to be on the same page with the rest. We did recognize that there wasn't any platform that could be able to help us understand what kinds of programs were currently being run in the different regional economic blocks. It might be helpful to be able to at least have an access to information to that, but also in a deeper engagement, this would be able to help us in terms of understanding how we can be able to coordinate, collaborate, and also where there are gaps, because we did highlight that a lot of focus was more around law enforcement and limited towards the prevention. But that said, all this can be analyzed once that particular information is provided. There was also a quite major challenge around reducing funding and funding limitations. And so this is something that remains a main challenge that going forward, we should be able to think around how can we be able to address this. The other findings was that we have good engagement within the RECs and member states, but there's potential of engagement across the RECs, especially on transboundary issues such as asset recovery, conduct of multinational corporations, mutual legal assistance, tackling illicit financial flows and anti-money laundering. And so that particular engagement between the different regional economic communities, perhaps like COMESA working with EAC or EAC working with Arab Maghreb and that particular likes. When it came to areas of commonality, and this was basically an exercise that we did, some of the issues that did emerge from the RECs was that, first of all, in terms of the commonality, is that there was a consensus on the gravity of corruption, its complexity, its the way how much it's endemic and systemic. That was something that all the RECs were on the same page. The other issue as well is that the need for member states' cooperation and coordination and the willingness to work together in tackling corruption in the region. The challenge that we did identify was the question around resources and technical capacity, because there were some particular RECs that had capacity, but there are others that didn't have. And so being able to understand how to share this particular resource across the continent would be quite useful. And the question around coordination and cooperation. In terms of opportunities, I think one of the key opportunities was how to be able to deepen engagement, how to be able to learn from each other, knowledge sharing of expertise through mentorship, and a repository of knowledge and tools. So what were the cooperation areas that did emerge through the mapping exercise? I'm just taking you through the thematic issues that came about. And one of it was program coordination and collaboration to strengthen program implementation and avoid any duplication. And it was agreed that regional economic communities and the AUCPCC would be engaged in being able to flesh out what programs the RECs were involved in, and being able to just develop a matrix to be able to just help the entire REC community understand who is doing what, where, and what are the gaps, and how we can be able to ensure that there's no duplications, because there was a realization that some of the programs that were being done, there was sort of a lot of duplication, especially on training, when it came to training on perhaps anti-money laundering, or even trainings on FIUs and whatnot. There was also an agreement to have an annual inter-RECs dialogue together with anti-corruption authorities to discuss thematic issues identified during the year. Some of these issues that did emerge were topics like asset recovery, and basically running through the thematic focus of the different issues covered in the AUCPCC. There was also an agreement to undertake joint missions with RECs during review of the AUCPCC, and the need to be able to recognize the importance of the anti-corruption authorities in terms of strengthening that particular perspective. There was the cooperation around capacity building and execution of innovative strategies in training, expertise sharing, and mentorship across the RECs. There was also the issue around working on joint research and development of an accountability index, to be able to just highlight that the current indexes that we currently have not been quite sufficient. And so working together with the RECs and research institutions to just be able to develop that particular index. And the last one really was joint efforts to encourage the ratification, domestication of the AUCPCC, and strengthening of its implementation at the RECs and member state level. In terms of the result areas, after this engagement would have occurred, one of the things that we foresaw was the engagement would contribute to reduction of corruption. It would enhance implementation of the FCTA through addressing barriers of trade in the region, such as bribery, corruption, IFFs, and anti-money laundering, strengthen implementation of the AUCPCC and development of policy, regulatory and monitoring framework on prevention and combating corruption at REX and member states. It would also enhance cooperation at REX and member states to ensure institutions charged with combating corruption deter, detect, and sanction corruption. In terms of building, it would build the capacity of stakeholders to ensure they are able to respond to issues appropriately. And lastly, facilitate the exchange of good practices and promote dialogue on common areas of interest. Lastly, it's really about the strategies. And so how would this be done? I think relationship building is very critical. Collaboration in terms of tackling corruption, money laundering, and illicit financial flows is interdependent on how the REX and AUABC work together. And the last one is on partnerships. We did also recognize the question around future and emerging shifts and what this meant for the continent. And one is, first of all, the trade integration with African Continental Free Trade Agreement taking root, and how corruption could be a potential binding constraint, and how to be able to address it. I remember Cargo did mention it also in his presentation, and so it's one of those questions that we need to be alive to when we think about what are some of the future shifts and what do they mean. There's also the question around the increase of youth population in Africa and the demand for opportunities, and how tackling corruption can unlock resources and increase opportunity cost for the demographic dividend. And so being able to ensure that some of these issues are quite deliberately undertaken. And then is also the question around reduction of aid and how member states and how we can be innovatively be able to still fund what we would want to fund by going deeper into the member states to incentivize them to be able to contribute towards funding the gaps. And so this is quite important for us, even as we think about the long-term trajectory of Africa's plan and how this can be realized. So there was a major question, and I think it's also a question for reflection in this particular meeting, was what does the setup of the financial centers on the continent mean for the REX and AUABC preparedness to tackle the emergence of illicit financial flows, capital flight, and proliferation of secrecy jurisdiction? How can we tackle the emerging challenges? With that, I'd like to just thank you, and if you have any questions, feel free to come back to me. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Nassi, pour cette présentation. Avec votre permission, on a déjà dépassé d'abord l'heure convenue, mais il y a des importantes personnes qui ont demandé la parole, à savoir l'ancien président du Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine, M. Elias Jean-Baptiste, et un éminent acteur de lutte contre la corruption au Congo, M. Professeur Mwendambali. Je vais vous donner 1 minute chacun pour pouvoir intervenir. Honorable Jean-Baptiste Elias, si vous êtes connecté, vous avez la parole. C'est moi qui est parti. Je vais demander au professeur Mwendambali, lui aussi s'il est disponible, de prendre la parole. Apparemment, ils sont partis. Et cela étant, je voudrais demander aux panélistes de répondre aux questions suivantes. Il y a des gens qui ont posé des questions en ligne. Le premier, c'est Martia Atse. Il demande, est-ce que le réseau de lutte contre la corruption de la Côte d'Ivoire fait-il le classement des pays les plus corrompus jusqu'au moins corrompus? Il y a encore une fois demandé comment le Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine sur la lutte contre la corruption, fait pour une lutte efficace contre l'évasion fiscale en Afrique. Et professeur, vous avez la parole.
Est-ce que c'est l'RDC qui a la parole? Merci.
Oui,
Merci,
oui, professeur.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour à tous les collègues en ligne. Je salue l'initiative que vous avez prise d'organiser ces webinaires. Je vous en remercie sincèrement parce que ça nous permet, avec la pandémie de Corona, de renouer les contacts avec les instances qui attendent de nous apporter la lumière. Madame Nancy, quand elle a parlé par rapport à la thématique, j'ai compris les rôles que doivent jouer, ça il faut l'avouer, les agences de lutte contre la corruption réunies au sein des regroupements régionaux. Je reconnais ce rôle est très important, mais je me sens un peu bloqué parce que nous visons le même objectif, mais nous n'avons pas les mêmes instruments. J'aurais souhaité, par exemple, savoir si chaque État africain ou faisant partie du groupe est doté d'une stratégie nationale de lutte contre la corruption. Est-ce que la SADC elle-même, à part le protocole de la SADC, prévoit un schéma de stratégie de lutte contre la corruption qui devrait servir de modèle aux différents pays membres de notre groupe régional économique? Ça, c'est la problématique que j'ai posée partout où je suis passé. Et j'ai remarqué que chacun y va selon son mode d'élevage, selon son mode d'approche. Il fallait d'abord harmoniser notre approche stratégique avant de parler de coopération qui est nécessaire, avant de parler des rapatriements des avoirs, c'est bien, mais au niveau de la prévention, il faut régler la question méthodologique. Vraiment, nous avons une stratégie. Je ne connais pas le contenu des stratégies de quelques pays membres. Je me suis inspiré du cas du Bénin. Arias est là pour en témoigner, mais je ne sais pas si c'est la même stratégie qui fonctionne dans d'autres pays. Je chute en disant ceci. Si vous regardez bien, la plupart des constitutions africaines, des États de notre regroupement régional, la question de la corruption n'est pas priorisée. Je vais ajouter les Zimbabwe. Je prends un modèle que j'ai copié. En Zimbabwe, il y a dans la Constitution tout un chapitre qui parle de la bonne gouvernance et de la lutte contre la corruption comme étant les fondamentaux qui peuvent permettre le développement de ce pays. Est-ce que c'est le cas dans tous les pays? Dans mon pays, je vous dis que non. Et quand je me présente devant les députés pour demander d'adopter une loi portant déclaration des avoirs ou une loi portant lutte contre la corruption, ils me disent nous les députés, nous ne sommes pas concernés par ces déclarations des avoirs parce que la Constitution ne prévoit nulle part la déclaration des avoirs des députés. Pour la loi anticorruption, ils ont dit la même chose, oubliant même que notre Constitution prévoit à son article 215 que les lois internationales, les traités que nous avons signés avec des pays tiers, avec des organismes internationaux, ont un primat sur les lois internes. Et ça nous permet de légiférer sur les questions de lutte contre la corruption. Là encore, les députés refusent. Par contre, ils envisagent une démarche demandant l'amnistie des infractions de corruption parce qu'ils sont trempés dans la chose interdite. Voilà un peu les quelques difficultés que nous rencontrons. Corona oblige, nous n'avons pas été tellement en contact. Nous avons impulsé au niveau de la SADC, à partir d'une structure informelle de l'Afrique de l'Est, un modèle de projet qu'on a déposé au niveau de la SADC, qu'on a transformé en SAC. Mais jusqu'aujourd'hui, SAC ne se manifestait pas parce qu'on y a mis des gens qui ne sont pas des spécialistes, parce qu'on y a mis des gens qui ont été recrutés, je ne sais pas selon quel critérium. Voilà un peu quelques difficultés qui me poussent à vous dire sincèrement, il faut remettre la pendule à zéro, le compteur à zéro, et partir de l'approche méthodologique qui doit être commune à nous tous, tout en tenant compte des spécificités régionales. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci à vous, cher professeur. J'ai vu que parmi les participants, il y a Monsieur Matata qui a demandé la parole, Jean-Pierre Passi Zampapa Bouka qui a demandé la parole. Je vais donner 2 minutes chacun pour pouvoir présenter. Vous avez la parole, Monsieur Matata. Apparemment, il n'est pas disponible. Je vais demander à Jean-Pierre Passi Zambapa Bouka pour pouvoir répondre.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. First of all, to congratulate the Commission for a very excellent organization and you, Chairperson, for your chairmanship. I am representing COMESA to the African Union. I would be very brief, actually. I wanted, first of all, to start by congratulating all the panelists and eventually not ask them any question because I was enjoying their presentation, especially that the majority are colleagues. Number two, I want Chairperson really to appreciate and welcome the study. In fact, I was taking pictures of the slides by Nancy because I found them so relevant. But thirdly, Chairperson, first of all, to really appreciate the conclusion, even if they are preliminary findings of the study, because if you look at the area of cooperation and the area of commonality she has discovered, you really look forward to a very interesting engagement between REX and the Commission. And perhaps because I have only 1 minute, I could say that it's interesting to discover that not all the REX have regional frameworks, but at the same time, and I think IGAD said it, at the same time discover that it is not preventing REX to do something in the area of fight against corruption. For instance, and I'm sure Nancy has discovered that, for instance, COMESA, through numerous programs like the money laundering, the border trade, the governance, the fight against war economy, the elimination of non-tariff barriers, and all the social program on inclusiveness, they all contribute to the fight against corruption. So I would really end by encouraging the AU Commission on Fight Against Corruption to really go ahead and finalize this study, and more importantly, organize an interesting validation meeting to distill the best actions we can do together. This is what I wanted to say, Mr. Chairperson, and I really thank you for giving me this opportunity. I thank you very much.
Merci à vous. Je vais accorder la parole à M. Osahana Uyao, qui est le chef de l'institution de lutte contre la corruption au Togo. Vous avez la parole, Monsieur le Président. Et Osahana Uyao, apparemment, il n'est pas disponible. Qui ont été posées. Mathieu Hatse demande comment le Conseil consultatif de la lutte contre la corruption de l'Union africaine fait pour une lutte efficace contre l'évasion fiscale en Afrique. Aussi, pourquoi l'Union africaine ne fait pas contre la corruption pour stimuler des pays à suivre cet exemple comme le prix du champion africain en matière de infrastructures en Afrique. Donc, les différents panélistes ont la parole pour répondre à ces questions.
J'ai la parole. Allô? Me recevez? Vous recevez le Togo?
Oui, on vous reçoit bien, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais profiter de cette célébration, tout d'abord pour renouveler nos félicitations à M. Jean-Louis pour son élection à la tête du Conseil. Je voudrais aussi exprimer nos remerciements à Mme Zénab du Sénégal pour sa brillante présentation.
Didier, stop. Didier, stop.
Vous me recevez?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Oui. Je continue pour dire que je remercie aussi M. Emmanuel Doudou pour la présentation des efforts au niveau de la CEDEAO. En plus de tout ce qu'ils ont dit, je voudrais ajouter le rôle du JAVA, le groupe intergouvernemental d'action contre le blanchiment des capitaux, qui impulse la lutte contre le blanchiment ainsi que le financement du terrorisme au moyen des tests harmonisés et puis des cellules nationales de traitement des informations financières. Je voudrais aussi mentionner le rôle de l'UMOA en ce qui concerne les États francophones plus un État lusophone au total de 8, qui impulse également la bonne gouvernance en matière de finances publiques et marchés publics. Elle édicte des directives qui sont implantées au niveau national, ce qui permet aux États d'avancer dans la réglementation en ce qui concerne ces deux secteurs vitaux. Merci beaucoup pour avoir organisé cette visioconférence pour nous permettre d'échanger. Tout mon équipe vous dit merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et je vais donner la parole à Dr. Jean-Baptiste Elias. Je rappelle qu'il est aussi président du Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine sur la corruption. Vous avez la parole, Monsieur le Président. Apparemment, il n'est pas disponible. Je vais donner la parole à Dalitso Bonongwe. Vous êtes le bienvenu, Monsieur Dalitso Bonongwe.
Allô, vous m'entendez?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Oui, je suis disponible. Bonjour.
Bonjour, bonjour.
Je voudrais présenter toutes mes félicitations à l'honorable président du Conseil consultatif et à toute son équipe, à la vice-présidente, au rapporteur et à tous les honorables membres pour l'organisation de cette conférence. La journée africaine de lutte contre la corruption est très importante pour nous. Je félicite tous les panélistes qui ont vraiment fait du bon travail et qui nous ont donné beaucoup d'informations. J'ai cependant une seule inquiétude, c'est l'application de ce que les communautés régionales économiques vont faire à travers les États. Vous savez, beaucoup de nos États se réfugient sous le vocable de souveraineté pour ne pas appliquer ce qui doit être bon pour tout le monde. Est-ce qu'on peut trouver une solution à ce problème pour que la lutte contre la corruption puisse avancer en Afrique et que d'autres pays ne mettent pas le volet de souveraineté pour ne pas appliquer les directives qui sont faites à droite, à gauche? Je sais de quoi je parle et je suis sûr que beaucoup de panélistes et beaucoup de participants à cette conférence savent bien que beaucoup de pays évoquent le problème de souveraineté pour ne pas appliquer les décisions qui sont prises au niveau continental. Je remercie encore tout le monde bonne fête à tout le monde et que chacun essaie de faire ce qu'il peut faire. Ce que nous allons faire ici au Bénin, je vais partager les vidéos et les documents avec vous pour que vous puissiez les avoir au niveau de toute l'Afrique. Merci.
Merci à vous, honorable président. Je vais demander maintenant aux différents panélistes de pouvoir répondre aux différentes préoccupations et aussi de répondre aux questions. Il y a aussi une question très pertinente, demande n'adhère pas au MAEP et notre question qui concerne le Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine de lutte contre la corruption. Demande si il y a des conseils, il y a des conventions avec les banques en Europe. Je vous remercie.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le modérateur.
Oui, vous pouvez intervenir, Madame la Présidente.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Je voudrais à mon tour remercier tous ceux qui ont félicité les panélistes et pour donner une esquisse de réponse au questionnement de notre collègue Jean-Baptiste Elias. Parlant de souveraineté, nous savons tous que lorsqu'un État adhère à un traité international, il renonce à une partie de sa souveraineté. Alors, il est difficile donc d'exciper la souveraineté internationale pour ne pas exécuter les recommandations contenues dans les traités et charges. Ceci dit, en ce qui concerne les CR, si on prend l'exemple de l'UEMOA, l'Union économique et monétaire ouest-africaine, nous savons que l'UEMOA a joué un rôle assez important dans l'uniformisation des législations au niveau des pays membres, les 8 pays membres. La preuve, c'est par ces directives, ces règlements et ces lois uniformes que beaucoup de choses ont été faites en ce qui concerne la lutte contre la corruption. Je prends pour exemple le code de transparence dans les finances publiques. Ça, c'est une transposition parce que lorsqu'on s'engage dans la communauté, on s'engage à atteindre des résultats. Et les directives, en réalité, fixent aux États des résultats à atteindre. Et la plupart, ou même l'ensemble des États membres de l'UEMOA, en transposant ces directives, ont adopté des lois ou des textes, en tout cas, qui mettent en œuvre les recommandations contenues dans ces directives. Et quand on pousse plus loin en parlant de règlement, là, moi, l'expression que j'utilise souvent, je dis que le règlement, c'est la loi nationale de l'Union, directement applicable sans être transposée. Alors, je ne sais pas maintenant si au niveau des autres CR, même si au niveau de la CEDEAO, on pourrait commencer la réflexion, ou si ça existe déjà, pour permettre aux États de transposer les directives ou d'appliquer directement les règlements. Ça, c'est la réponse que je voudrais donner en ce qui concerne la question de notre collègue Elias. Vous-même, Jean-Claude, vous avez posé une question, j'ai un peu oublié, par rapport à l'OFNAC, je crois. Si vous êtes en mesure de répéter, je pourrais donner des éléments de réponse. Merci. Jean-Claude.
Merci, honorable présidente, mais vu le temps que vous avez parti, je vous fais cadeau de cette question pour qu'on puisse effectivement avancer. Je vous remercie, honorable président.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. Juste vous dire que nous, ici, au niveau de l'OFNAC, du Sénégal, on est en train également de préparer la journée de lutte contre la corruption, la journée africaine qui sera célébrée demain. Si vous voyez le journal que je tiens, il y a déjà les annonces dans les journaux. Ce sera le 12 juillet à l'École nationale d'administration. On vous enverra les photos, les vidéos, tout ce qu'il faut pour montrer qu'on a célébré la journée. Merci et bonne fête à tous.
Merci beaucoup. Et je suis obligé de donner la parole pour finir à 3 intervenants. Il s'agit de Dalitso Bonongo, Timo Motas et Kagwe Moutahil. Donc, je vous donne 2 minutes pour qu'on puisse terminer en beauté. Il y a aussi le président de la SADC. Donc, 2 minutes, ça sera 8 minutes. Je vous remercie. Dalitso, vous avez la parole.
Thank you so much for organizing such a precious workshop webinar. I'd like to congratulate the AUCPCC for these efforts. Unfortunately, I'm not able to beam my video because of poor connectivity, and the better quality is coming through Nani image speaking. I just have a few words just to say, whenever each one of us is putting on the table ways and means where we can curb corruption, we should also remember in our holistic approach to include all other vessels which tend to carry these proceeds from corruption. I know common approach is to target banks, but be assured, being somebody with a banking experience, from the central banking perspective of it, banks are reasonably aware of the countermeasures involved, whilst other players like designated non-financial businesses and professions like real estate agents, dealers in precious stones and metals, vehicle dealers, you agree with me, these also deal with a lot more huge funds of money, and they also are attractive to perpetrators of corruption. So our effort should be inclusive. We should include even these other players over and above the banks. We should also have proper focus to the trade which we are facilitating. You know, of late we have trade-based money laundering. And because trade has got trust in most countries, criminals who are juggling money from corruption are also using these trade transactions to move around their money because they know trade is trusted and is supported. So that was just my 2 cents in this to say, to ensure indeed a holistic approach, we should make sure that we are putting spanners in all possible loopholes. I thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Et avant de donner la parole à Timo Motas, je vais donner la parole à Honorable Nirere, qui était la panéliste, pour qu'elle puisse effectivement donner sa contribution. Vous avez la parole, Honorable.
Thank you so much, moderator. It is indeed a great pleasure to be part of this virtual meeting, and I'd like to thank once again AUCPCC for this organizing this celebration. I wish to say that the cooperation and working in synergy between all actors are very key, and also we have to double efforts in working with private sector and civil society. There are some questions raised by our friends from DRC about strategy, about laws. I can say that it is a journey which needs working in synergy. First of all, at a national level, but also at a regional level. At national level, those anti-corruption agencies must be independent, autonomous. They must suggest some measures to be taken by the government, also to work as an advisor body. I can advise him to just to play the role in proposing the review of legal framework, also at political level, to work in synergy with other existing institutions. Thank you so much once again, and happy celebration. Thank you.
Merci, honorable. Je vais encore une fois demander un peu d'excuses parce que il y a honorable Joachim, qui est membre du Conseil consultatif de l'Union africaine, qui voudrait intervenir. Je vais demander votre diligence pour qu'il puisse donner sa petite contribution. Vous avez la parole, honorable Joachim. Honorable Joachim n'est pas prêt. Je vais demander à M. Timo Motas de pouvoir intervenir.
Faz favor, faz favor. Estou sim. Estou sim. Estou sim, por favor. Alô?
Oui, allez-y, honorable.
Estou sim, faz favor. Não seja... Muito obrigado. Portanto, é só para dizer que efetivamente nós estamos, portanto, a participar desta reunião e achamos que efetivamente foi uma, ou é uma iniciativa louvável e extremamente importante, na medida que, enquanto um continente africano, é importante que, tendo apostado para o combate deste fenómeno, que é um fenómeno que assola o mundo e que deixa o mundo...
Honorable, il n'y a pas de traduction en français.
Ah, ok. E comment... Bom, se é Monsieur Bizima, se faz favor. A senhora tradutora, se faz favor. Alô? Pois, vamos lá. Ah, não tem tradutor para francês. É isso, peço que me comunicaram. Não há tradução para francês? Ah, ok. Então posso continuar a falar? Porque me foi dito que não está a ser escutado, portanto, para a língua francesa. Ok.
Merci beaucoup.
Então,
Allez-y, monsieur honorable.
Não percebi essa intervenção. Senhora tradutora, posso avançar? Ok. Portanto, dizia eu que, portanto, o que me foi pedido é para fazer alguma intervenção sobre portanto, este ato, certo? Pronto, dizia eu que, portanto, da nossa parte, entendemos ser extremamente importante que os Estados africanos sintam a necessidade de unir-se no combate a um fenómeno que é extremamente desastroso para o mundo, que é este da corrupção. Todos nós sabemos os males que este fenómeno traz para as sociedades e fundamentalmente para os nossos Estados africanos, que precisam efetivamente, como eu digo, de se unir para combater, porque é um fenómeno que ultrapassa as fronteiras de cada um dos Estados e só unidos venceremos. Por isso, eu acho que ter sido uma iniciativa louvável, esta de comemorarmos, portanto, este dia africano deste combate, que é precisamente o dia 11, mas que foi definido que deveria ser comemorado entre o dia 9 e o dia 12, portanto, de julho. Sendo que hoje, dia 9, que é o dia do pontapé, digamos, de saída, se tenha efetivamente organizado este seminário, cujas intervenções foram extremamente valiosas. Os vários palestrantes que intervieram, portanto, de modo positivo. Ficamos, portanto, com uma noção de como é que está a ser desenvolvido, portanto, este cenário, sob o ponto de vista de várias zonas, das subzonas, portanto, do nosso continente e não só. E por isso entendemos, nós, enquanto Angola, somos uma parte integrante, efetivamente, deste continente, somos um país que, efetivamente, aderimos portanto, a esta convenção e somos um país que e pensamos que no âmbito da comunicação internacional, Vossa Excelência tem estado a acompanhar que nós estamos numa situação de um combate acérrimo, portanto, a este fenómeno a nível interno e comungamos, portanto, com o esforço internacional neste domínio. Muito obrigado.
Merci, honorable Pascal. Je vais demander à son Excellence Kagwe Ntali d'intervenir.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if you have forgotten me.
Oh, yes, Mr. Timon, you have to come before me. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Moderator, I'll confine myself to just 3 questions that were raised. The first one was raised by the moderator himself, whether we ever have joint investigations in the region. I think I'll just confirm that in the affirmative that yes, we do have those joint investigations with the countries around us here. And the second question was, or an observation was that, yes, we do have some, the same objectives, I mean, to combat corruption. But do we have a common strategy? Like, for instance, the example of our national anti-corruption strategies was cited. And I can confirm that, yes, I think a national strategy, anti-corruption strategy is very, very important. I think we can learn from or take cue from Seychelles, who have completed that process. We in Botswana, we have developed the strategy, but it has been going back and forth between us and the government, policy, I mean, anti-corruption policy. So it is very, very critical that we have a national anti-corruption policy, so that I mean, all the people or all key stakeholders in the country can understand and appreciate why it is important to combat corruption. There was also the issue of asset declaration, whether we have that in the SADC. I can also, again, confirm in the affirmative that we have promulgated a law, although, again, it is going through some revamping in Parliament. But I thought I should mention that. The issue of sovereignty that was raised by my old colleague Batista from Benin, yes, I think occasionally you'll get those issues arising, but I don't think they should actually discourage us from forging ahead and doing what is right. I mean, to make sure that we are all united against corruption. Thank you very much, sir.
Excellence, je demande apparemment il est parti, je ne vois pas. Je demande à le représentant de la SADC de pouvoir intervenir.
Merci, monsieur le modérateur.
Chair, I have not intervened yet.
Pardon.
Yes, Chair.
Après, monsieur le représentant de la SADC.
Avec la permission de Kagwe, je procède. Ok, je ne vais pas prendre beaucoup de temps, monsieur le modérateur, c'est juste pour informer qu'il y a une différence à faire entre une organisation d'intégration et une organisation de coopération. Les CER sont des organisations de coopération. Donc, bien sûr que ce sont les États membres qui guident et le CER, en l'occurrence la SADC, on exécute. Donc, la souveraineté des États, ça ne date pas d'aujourd'hui. Ça a toujours posé problème, mais ainsi va les choses. À notre niveau, il s'agit d'encourager une harmonisation basée sur le protocole de 2005 de la SADC. Donc, nous, à notre niveau, c'est de faire respecter, c'est de faire de sorte que les États membres respectent les principes et standards du protocole, ce qui est le cas dans les États membres de la SADC. Donc, bien évidemment, l'implémentation changera légèrement selon les pays, selon l'approche. Mais voilà, donc le policier est en place. Après, c'est aux États membres de l'implémenter, comme a dit mon collègue, M. Citodo, du Botswana également. Donc, voilà ce que je voulais dire rapidement pour couvrir ce qui a été dit posé comme question. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Kabwe Ntali, je m'excuse parce que je ne le voyais pas. Vous avez la parole. 2 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much, Chair. I only have 2 points to make. The first, Chair, is that as we think about our strategies and our institutions and our policies, there is a growing consensus among corruption experts that the anti-corruption fight has been very focused on institutions and on strategies. And one of the things perhaps that we need to look at is the informal relations and the networks that exist between the public and the private sector, between civil society and the church and the civil service and the multinational corporations and the corporations that are across our borders. There's a growing consensus that these informal networks, the relationships between these networks, there's a need for a greater understanding of them so that, because that is where the corruption is, between these networks that work out across countries, across borders, and even across continents. And so, because there's a growing frustration, some will say that are these strategies common or they are not common? Are we fighting towards the same goal? Is there a sense of asymmetry? Well, that is important. It is also important that we begin to focus on the network and the relationships that happen to foster corruption. And there's a need to focus on those things. That is my first point, Chair. My second and my last point is that in the African Union Convention on Combating and Preventing Corruption, Article number 21, relationship with other agreements, basically says that this convention and those who have signed it, it supersedes the provisions of any treaty or bilateral agreement governing corruption and related offenses. So, Chair, basically that is to say that this convention and the signatories of this convention have agreed that this convention is the most important convention on corruption and related offenses, and it goes above the other agreements that are there. Now, there will be confusion on this point, and perhaps I would urge the AUCPCC to perhaps write a note on Article 21 vis-a-vis the protocols and agreements that are there at the regional level and perhaps at the international level. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Kabwe. Merci à tout le monde. Bref, pour synthétiser tout ce qui a été dit, on vient de voir qu'il est très important en matière de lutte contre la corruption de renforcer la coopération au niveau régional, au niveau sous-régional, de renforcer les capacités institutionnelles et organisationnelles et de doter des chefs d'institution des moyens humains et financiers pour lutter efficacement contre la corruption. Tout en remerciant tout ça pour chacun pour son intervention, je vous remercie de votre patience et je passe la parole au président du Conseil pour pouvoir clôturer cette importante réunion. Apparemment, il n'est pas disponible. Je vais demander à la secrétaire exécutive de pouvoir nous donner les directives de fin de cette réunion. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants and colleagues. And I think I just want to thank all of you for having found time to join us in this webinar ahead of the African Anti-Corruption Day, which falls on 11th July. And I further want to ask you to join me in thanking the moderator and this panel, including the consultant for the insights and perspectives that have been shared in this webinar. And we've heard of some challenges that national anti-corruption agencies face in as far as the fight against corruption is concerned. And then we've also been given some recommendations on how the implementation of the convention can be strengthened through the implementation of other self-reinforcing charters as well as mechanisms. And then we've also been drawn to some areas which need more focus, more attention. And we learned of some good practices in as far as the fight against corruption is concerned in some national anti-corruption agencies, as well as some rates. We've heard of some centers of excellency elsewhere. And I think in the interest of time, what we are going to do, we are going to collect the outcomes from this webinar, and then we should be able to share with all of you, even as we forge ahead in fostering closer collaboration and synergy between different mechanisms. And as a board, we look forward to scaling up collaboration with the regional economic communities through the engagement strategy that is being finalized. And I think as we finalize that strategy, there are some areas that have come to the fore in this meeting that we may wish to go back on and just think through. And then we also look forward to continuing the collaboration with the different national anti-corruption agencies through various means, such as the African Anti-Corruption Dialogue that we've been organizing over the years. And in this regard, we are already extending an invitation to all of you to the upcoming African Anti-Corruption Dialogue scheduled for later this year, where again, we are going to discuss some of these issues we've been discussing, including updates on what has happened on some of the recommendations that have come from this webinar. And we can just discuss further how to enhance the synergies and strengthen collaboration in implementing the convention in order to register significant strides in the fight against corruption. And together, I think we can rise above the challenges that confront us as we fight corruption, whether at the national level, regional level, or indeed at the continental level. So I just want to thank you once again for all those contributions that have come. And let me also thank our friends, the interpreters, for having made it possible for us to be able to follow one another in this meeting. And we continue to engage with the other stakeholders in terms of the conversation that we've started today. Like I've indicated, we invite you to the anti-corruption dialogue. We also have activities, the action, and as well as other activities to Monday. So we should go through these as we to as far as the fight against corruption is concerned. So with that, thank you so much. And the Honorable Vice Chairperson, I think, can now officially close the webinar in the absence of the chair. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.